start recording. So, hello there. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So, let's start with a few basics. What is your name and what do you do in general?
So my name is Ro. For work, I am a software engineer. I do C++ in software engineering, and I do it for military systems. Right now, I'm working on military simulation systems. So what we do at the company that I currently work at, which I started working here only about a month ago, but what we do here is we design the simulation software and some of the math that goes into the engines that determines, say, if you have an aircraft or if you have a radio or if you have a radar, you have a certain piece of equipment that you're going to be using out in the field. So when our customers, which tend to be like the US military or the military adjacent things, when our customer wants to plan a particular mission, they need to have a software into which they can throw these components, be like, we're going to place a radar here, we're going to place our aircraft here. This is what the communication is going to be between this plane and this plane, or however they need to have a way to like simulate that mission beforehand and make sure that it's going to work, or see if it's going to work and what their potential like threats or weather issues or being seen, like being intercepted, those types of issues. They need to be able to have a software where they can model that and simulate it to see if like their mission will be successful. So the company that I work for is essentially helping develop some of that simulation software, and they write a bunch of their own models for either aircraft or for radar or for radios or for any component that might be out in the field, as well as the math that goes into deciding what the interaction between them would be. So I basically work on a combination of both, developing the models as well as the communication or like the interplay between several parts of the program. And eventually, our deliverable is something that the customers can use to simulate a mission for whatever their requirements might be.
hmm And the customer, I imagine, is just the government, or could there be other customers?
So, the way that this works is usually there are multiple companies that work on software like this, or even on the hardware. Like there's companies that produce the actual radios or the actual aircraft, or however that is. So, currently, most of our customers are either government, which is like the actual agencies that are like maybe intelligence agencies or military agencies that like plan missions or provide data to plan missions to the military, or our customers can also be maybe some of the companies that are manufacturing these components, like the ones that require, like, let's say if they're producing a radio and we say you need to have this type of communication protocol enabled on that radio, because that's the only way that you'll be able to talk to this other one, or however, then that company will hire us or companies like ours to just come up with those numbers that we find using our simulation software and use that, report those numbers back to them so they can use that to actually build their products.
hmm
So it's a combination of government and companies that the government uses. So other contractors. So we contract
hmm
to the government directly, or we contract to other contractors. Long story short, yeah.
And I imagine there is like a lock, a region lock that you have to conform with. Like you can only cooperate with certain companies in a certain jurisdiction, or it's a free market.
So the way this works is, yes, we usually the trade space is classified on many different levels. For one, like anyone who's foreign is not allowed access to any of the information. And you have to be American. You have to go through a bunch of background checks to be given a security clearance. If you if you choose to work at a company like this. It's not necessary for all parts of the project. Actually, for my particular type of work that I've been doing so far, well, it's only been a month, but for anyone on my team, really, we've had times when we needed to get access to the actual numbers only like once or twice because it's not you don't actually need the classified numbers to develop the models. You
Hmm.
just need to like you can just use dummy numbers. So we actually don't know a lot of the times whether like what we're working on is going to be used for, well, we don't know where it's going to be used a lot of the
Hmm.
times. We don't know what the purpose of the models that we're creating is, except like this general big picture that I just told you.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so I would say that as long as there are no foreigners involved in the creation of these things, it is mostly unclassified, the actual work that we're doing. The use of it, the users and what they use it for, that part will be classified. Um, they still do try to get us access to that level of information if we might ever need it, but so far, at least I have not needed it. So
Okay,
that's pretty
that's good.
much
That's good.
what that means. Yeah.
And it makes sense, of course, given how mission critical this is, for there to
Yeah.
be secrecy at all levels and to compartmentalize all the parts that you can and keep it as secret as possible.
Yeah, yeah. But I am able to like as I just did, I am able to talk about it without getting into the details
Hmm.
to like some level.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Okay, okay, that's good. That's good.
so uh I'm just saying this for the people in the audience if
Uh-huh.
anyone's watching. So Prat and I discussed this beforehand. I'm also a hobby artist, so I'm going to be drawing a portrait of him as we do this interview. So I'm going to be looking down a lot and I'm going to have my pencil right now. I've just been waving it in the air, but I'm starting with this
Yeah.
blank piece of paper and I'm going to be drawing a pencil portrait as we speak. So again, I apologize because I'm gonna be like this a lot, but I will still be answering the questions. I'll still be
Ah,
talking.
that's good. That's good. That's good. Thank you. And
So
yeah, if
I'm
I
sorry
need to
about that.
adjust my angle, you can tell.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, very well, very well. So, of course, you just mentioned art, and I want to get to that. But first,
Mhm.
I'm curious, how does one end up in that kind of job that you described here? Like, is there some specific set of qualifications you need to have? Do you go through a certain school, or is it general purpose knowledge of the kind of programming you are doing, and that's enough? Like somebody from the industry, for example, could transfer to what you are doing without special training?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say you need special training per se, but I don't know if training exists
Hmm.
like of that type exactly. I will say that so for me, the way that I landed my first job of this type straight out of college, this is not my first job. This is actually my fourth job. But that's because the other two that I worked previously were like I worked one for 2 years, one like direct hire job for 2 years. Then I worked two temporary contracts, and together they made up about a year. And now this is my fourth, which is another direct hire. So I'm not working contracts anymore. That's another story. It's not stable. It's not. They don't care about you if you're a contractor. But anyway, the so the first job I got, the one that I was a direct hire on, that I just ended up getting by accident. So I just like interviewed, I applied at as many companies as I could straight out of college. And this was the only company, seeing as I had an EE degree and not a CS degree, and I was only applying to programming jobs. I didn't have programming classes on my resume. So most people, like most companies, would just look at my resume and throw it out because they were like, this person's not trained in what we're looking for. But this one company, they actually had a pretty bad shortage of people, and they gave me a chance. So I got an interview, and then I got the job after I got the interview. So that was the first interview I got, where when you're straight out of college, they don't expect you to have much industry knowledge of anything. They just expect you to be able to code.
Hmm.
So they asked me like programming questions, C++ questions, just questions like, do you know what say threads are, or do you know what um, even simple object oriented programming principles. Like, do you know what classes and objects are? Do you know what constructors and destructors are? So they asked me like pretty basic questions in that interview, and I believe they had me do like a little coding assessment where they just like had a they had like a big program where there were like pointers and references and um random inputs and outputs to functions being passed back and forth throughout this whole document, uh, between like a few different types of objects. And they had like inside of their main method, they had like a couple of calls that would like go into functions that would call other functions that would call other functions and that kind of deal. And then they had a question at the end saying what would be the output of main. It was just something like that. So I could answer those. Luckily, I got those right. Um, and I was kind of shaky on some of it, but I did end up getting the right answer. Um, and that's pretty much all that they checked as far as like technical knowledge. Outside of that, there was like some behavioral stuff, like just seeing if you'd be a good person to work with, seeing if you'd be flexible to like learning from senior engineers. What if you're like younger, seeing if you'd be, willing to take criticism or willing to even how open are you to like speak about your own ideas, or are you super shy, or are you like more bold, or ready to talk. So they looked at a bunch of different things like that, pretty much just what any programming interview would look for. And it was after I got that job that that first company I worked at started to do the paperwork to like get me access to any classified information I might need. And they did that for all their employees. So that was just like something that they did for everyone who joined. And once you get a clearance, at least like the level of clearance that I have, I don't have the highest level. So like once you get a clearance, you don't lose it after you leave the company. You get to keep it for 5 years. So
Okay.
2 years or 5 years. I'm actually not sure, but
Mm-hmm.
I was not out of a job for more than 2 years, so I'm not actually sure. But, so you get to keep it, and then the fact that you already have one, makes you very attractive to future companies when they're trying to hire you in the same trade space, kind of, um, just because the fact that if they had to, like, process you again, get you, like, government investigated and verified and made sure that you're a trustworthy person, no criminal record or anything like that. Even for that kind of thing, it costs them money because they have to like pay all the they have to pay for your background screening basically.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can join their company and be like, "Hey, I'm a person you don't need to pay $30,000 for," um, then you're obviously much more hireable. So I guess like that was a very convoluted answer, but what I wanted to get at is it's not exactly training, it's more of just your background. And if you're really good and you ace your interviews still and you're like coming in at a senior level, maybe not a junior level, and someone thinks like a company thinks that you clearly know what you're doing, then they will definitely hire you from other sectors as well. It's not
Mm-hmm.
hard and fast. It's not that you have to be it's not like you can get into defense like straight out of college or you can never get into defense. It's not like that. But
I see. Yes.
yeah, but I will say that since now I haven't been working for very long. I have 3.5 years of work experience. I graduated in 2022. Um, but if you've if you have between like 0 and 5 years of work experience, I would say maybe it's a little bit harder to make your way into defense if that wasn't your first job, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But not super hard. You still can.
Did your background in electrical engineering factor into their evaluation, you think? Like the fact that you could demonstrate that you have strong fundamentals and you know things, even if you don't know C++ per se, you can reason about engineering problems in general. So, did they
Um,
think of that? Did they tell you anything about that? Was that a
well,
comment?
so there hasn't at least for me, there hasn't been much There haven't been companies that after my first job, like, they did like, in that interview, I did have a first, like, initial question, like, "Why software if your major is EE?" And I gave them some answer. I actually don't remember what I said at this point. It was, like, more than 3 years ago. But, um the later companies that I worked at, like the all the other interviews that I did, once you have a job, like once you're not in your first job anymore, at least my experience is that they don't really care what you did in college. They just want to ask what you did at your previous job. So there might have been like a cursory glance over, oh, I see you transitioned from EE into software, but I don't think that anyone really would dwell on the EE part after that first interview just because they're like, "Yeah, some people change fields." They just, like they tried to, like, get an idea of how well I could solve problems just by asking about my work experience, not so much about college.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
fascinating. And do you need any kind of letter of recommendation from your former employer, or do you get some certification? Like, how does that work in general? Like, how would they assess the quality of your job in the previous place where you work?
Well, they don't really, you just have to talk about it. Like, it's pretty much like any interview. Now,
Uh-huh.
if they think that you maybe now I'm not sure if this is true because it's never happened to me, but maybe if someone doesn't perform, like, super well on an interview, but also isn't bad, like, if someone's kind of middling and they aren't sure if they want to hire you, then maybe they might reach back out and ask for a letter of recommendation, just like any other job, really.
Mhm.
I don't think that it's not a standard part of the procedure to ask for a letter of recommendation.
Mhm.
That's
Okay,
yeah.
okay, very interesting. So, what I gather from this is that a non-trivial part, maybe the most important part after you get in, is
Mhm.
your quality as a person. So when they talk to you and they can see that you have a way with words and you can see that you can argue your case, or maybe
Yeah.
you
I
appear
wouldn't call
confident or convincing.
it
Yeah, not argue, maybe that's the wrong
arguing.
way, but to basically make your case and
Mhm.
to be persuasive and
Yeah,
to
yeah.
show that, yeah, you can handle things, like you are in control of the situation.
I would say so. There's definitely an element of that. Like, I do think that once you're I do think that for most industry jobs, like if you're not doing some kind of cutting edge research, which to be fair, most companies aren't, like it's only like once you get to the top of the top, maybe Google and not even all of Google, like maybe some parts of Google or Amazon or like Meta, like I don't know. Just unless you're at the top of the top as far as like industry research kind of goes, you're not doing anything super intelligent for your job that the next person can't do. At least that's how I feel. I feel like yes, there are some people whose technical skills just aren't good enough maybe, but like I feel like once you pass the initial bar, like let's say you just have to be able to like from not being able to code to being able to code and being able to code decently, being able to debug, being able to like know what's wrong with your code, being able to like look at someone else's code and be like this might be what's wrong. It's not that hard to do. That's at least that's what I think. I think that many or most people could do it if they just like trained for it or taught themselves or however. If I would say that anyone who spends at least a year trying to learn to like code would easily be able to code. So I feel like the skill set, the technical skill set is actually not that's not the part that, makes or breaks whether you get a job. I feel like or even keep a job rather. I feel like what's more important is just how you are with people. Um
Hmm, hmm.
in a lot of ways.
Yes, yes, of course. That's a big thing because if you are not a team player, or generally if you don't fit in with the culture at the office there,
Mhm.
ultimately your technical acumen doesn't factor in. Like, you can be the best, but if you are a nuisance to work with,
Yeah.
people will just be like, "Oh, I don't want to be there. I don't want to
Yeah,
deal with this
exactly.
person."
Exactly, yeah. So I do think that like that is as important or even more important in some cases than technical skills just because I feel like technical skill there's no shortage of technical skills. The technical skills are not that hard. At least in any of the jobs that I've worked and I have like a lot of friends who work in the same field or similar fields and they all say the same thing. It's like what I do day to day is not that smart. That's
Mhm.
what most people say, unless they're like at the top of the top and they're doing PhD level research or something.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I imagine if you are at that level, then of course there is a distinction between coding and programming in the sense that you can design systems
Hmm.
of systems. Like you are
Yeah,
what's it called? The software architect, I think is the description,
yeah,
or a
exactly.
senior engineer, whatever.
So software architects and
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah,
no, no, sorry,
yeah.
it wasn't important. It was just my dad. Um, but yeah. Oh, hold on.
Of course, dads can be persistent. But take your time. Take your time. No pressure.
Sorry, I just texted him saying I'm busy.
Yeah, that's good.
But mm, yeah, I did try to keep like my phone was on silent, my iPad was on silent, but I forgot that I get calls through my computer.
Of course,
So
of course. Well, that's the level of integration that Apple strives for,
yeah,
of course.
yeah. Yeah,
So basically, I was making a remark that once you reach a certain level of technical
mhm,
acumen, of technical skill, then I think there is a distinction between coding, as in
and
just understanding code, and programming, as in being able to design systems of
mhm,
systems which have
yeah.
logical consistency and they are coherent.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
I will say, like, I have struggled with people. I'm not the best with people. I have
Mm,
struggled with being, too opinionated and, like, trying to push an argument for, like, something that I think is going to work better technically, when I guess, like, something I've had to learn, although I haven't had a ton of work experience, but I've had, like, some, and something I've had to learn over the course of what I do have is that sometimes you like the company has the budget and the hours to like implement a roundabout inefficient solution. So what helps you is to just not argue sometimes. Like even if the way that like other people are suggesting is worse than yours, like I've kind of learned that it's better to not say anything sometimes. That's
hmm
definitely something I've had to learn though, and not
hmm
something that came to me naturally at all. Because 'cause I'm very much an efficiency pusher kind of. I'd be like the kind of person who'd be like, "This little thing in the system doesn't make sense, and I'm willing to spend 5 hours arguing about it." But that isn't productive, I guess, like when you're, um
Yeah, yeah. Because of course they are companies, and what
yeah,
matters
exactly.
is the balance sheet. Then there
Exactly,
is a business logic which overrides any other kind of argument. So if it doesn't
yeah,
make
exactly.
business sense, everything else ultimately will have to bow out. Say okay.
Pretty much, yeah. But
But yeah, of course, I can feel how it is for you. Like it's like, oh, this is wrong.
yeah, and that's why, like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not the kind of person who's too attached to my job. I am attached to the idea of having a job and being like self-sufficient. But exactly who I work for or that kind of thing, I do feel like unless you're at the top of the top, like I said, you're not doing anything cutting edge. At least most people aren't. So, I would like to get into a job where I could like solve challenging problems all day, but it's just not really realistic to expect that 100% of the time. Maybe 20 to 30% of the time you'll be solving a challenging problem, but it won't be all the time. Um
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Sounds
yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And also, from what I can gather, is that you have deadlines because, of course, there is a business logic. You have
Mhm.
deadlines you have to meet, which are, from a programming standpoint, arbitrary. They make
Um
sense from a
yeah.
business standpoint, but
Yep.
programming wise, it should be like when it's ready, right? There shouldn't be
Pretty much.
like a deadline.
So have you I believe you don't currently work for a company, you don't work like for anyone else. But do you have experience, like, working for companies in the past as well? Because you seem like you do. Um, what was that like
Little.
for you?
Little experience in that regard.
Okay,
I worked for an institution, like a public institution. Like that was the big thing I did. So the European
okay,
Parliament. That's the big thing I
Oh,
did.
I
And then
see.
I was working as the equivalent of a contractor. So that's what I did the most.
Okay, okay. So what were you doing? Were you a software engineer or were
No, no.
you
So completely unrelated. Me, I was doing politics.
you were doing
So,
politics? Okay.
but the technical side of it. So not the public speaking side, not the voter phishing side, but the part that has to do with the technicalities. Like, for example, there is a piece of legislation that has to go through parliament. The politicians have to amend it. They have to table their own opinions and say, oh, you know what, this is not right. This is not good policy. We should do this instead. So,
Mhm.
of course, these amendments are processed by people who approach the text in a technical way. So they don't think in terms of, okay, how will I convince the voters? They think in terms of, okay, what makes sense given our position, our ideology, our worldview. Same
Yeah.
idea if you do position papers. And same idea if you do, there is this thing in Europe, the European Union, called the Horizon. I forget how it's called, the Horizon program. But
Mhm.
basically, it's a way for the European Union to fund scientific research.
Gotcha.
And you apply for a grant. And of course, you have to write your application. And again, it's a technical document that a committee will have to review.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That
So me, I
makes sense.
wasn't doing anything related to programming. And then circa 2016, I discovered Linux. And I'm like, oh, this is
Okay.
a cool thing, right? So I started playing around and little by
Mhm.
little, I learned to program and to write Emacs Lisp eventually, long story short.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
But yeah,
Mhm.
my background is definitely not in programming slash engineering or any neighboring field. So
Yeah,
how
that
I
makes
ended up
sense.
here is kind of yeah, off field, how it's called.
Yeah, I would say, like, I'm probably, like, someone who's I considered myself a little bit off field, but then I meet people like you who are like, what they did and what they ended up, like, working in or trying to do with their lives is so different. So, like, yeah, um, like, compared to that, I'm just someone who stayed in my own field.
Hmm,
But,
hmm.
hmm,
There is this well-known programmer called Matt Mullenweg. I think that's the expression. That's the pronunciation. The author
okay,
of WordPress, or one of the
okay,
lead developers, anyway, of WordPress.
uh-huh,
And what Matt was saying in some podcast that I listened to many years ago is that even though his background is technical, I think
yeah,
in software engineering, he
mhm,
benefited the most from reading history.
oh, yeah,
And the idea was basically that he had a more grounded appreciation of systemic phenomena. Like there is a system at play here, and what we
mhm.
are witnessing cannot be reduced to just a part of the system. You have to understand the big picture to understand the little things.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Um, I will say that, like, you mentioned so I'm guessing your major was political science. Did you go to college,
Yes,
for
yes,
yeah,
yes.
okay, okay. So, political science, I'm guessing?
It was actually multidisciplinary. So it was politics of the European Union, economics, and law.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting, okay.
that was, and me, I focused more on economics rather than the others.
Okay.
But I did a little bit of everything. So it's basically a generalist.
Yeah, that's actually really cool because I tend to have so I never had any formal education in political science or theory or economics or anything like that. I mean, I took a couple of, like, economics electives when I was in undergrad, but that's about it. Um, but I'm very interested in in political systems, I will say. Not necessarily political ideology, because I feel like a lot of it is half-baked and doesn't really go anywhere. Which is why I don't like reading most political authors in their original because I feel like they kind of circle about the same thing over and over. Now, I could be wrong. Of course, there might be like a lot of authors that you've read, but maybe I haven't read, which are like which don't do that. But I've I really feel like a lot of times when it comes to political thinking, like when it comes to mapping out a political system, people are just trying to, and I'm not talking about like distinguished philosophers. I'm more talking about just people who are maybe you meet day to day who try to talk to you about like what they believe and how they believe that the world should work. Um, a lot of times people pick a frame, people pick a system, and they argue inside it. Like they say, we're going to have a world where this, and this happens. And then with those, you know, with those principles already there, this is what I believe. And I just don't think that that's very useful because your view is your opinion is not, it's not unrespectable. Like I respect their opinion, but at the same time, its actual implementation value is kind of not there, you know? And I feel like these days a lot of political discourse has kind of moved towards that. Like it's moved towards, this is what I think the ideal situation is. But people are thinking too much about the ideal situation and not about the real situation. I think that that's and I said this in the vaguest way I could, pretty much. Like I said this without having to name any specific people or specific examples. But I do feel
Hmm.
like that's my opinion. So I wanted to know, like, do you have a similar opinion? Of course, I'm not as well versed in European politics. I mostly just know about America. But like if you have similar thoughts, or would you say that you have a different perspective on this?
Yeah, yeah. In short, I agree with you. You mentioned the word which I think is key: implementation. The
Yeah. Mhm.
implementation value, you said. And I think that's
Yeah.
key because many people think in terms of vibes. Like, oh, I like this, basically. I
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
this world. I like this outcome.
Mhm.
But they don't have the technical, the programmatic, if you want, understanding of how do we go from the current state of affairs to that outcome, to that eventuality. So
Mhm.
because they don't have that programmatic way of thinking, ultimately then opinion is not grounded in any kind of rigor. So they cannot
Exactly.
actually go anywhere with it. And you
I
see that
agree.
with a lot of opinions. Of course, there are people who do have that, and
Mhm.
they are the people who ultimately get to do what they want. But generally, when you hear people talking, it's vibes.
Yeah, exactly, and that's pretty much exactly what I mentioned. So, who are some political thinkers that you really like, or ones that maybe you don't resonate with as much, as far as maybe what they say, and maybe give me the person, and also like a general one or two line summary of what their thoughts are, in case
Hmm.
I don't know who that is.
Of course,
Yeah.
there are many, but generally, if you pick the political philosophers, just to say, political philosophers doesn't mean that they were only talking about politics, but they have
Yeah,
contribution.
philosophy, and
Yeah,
then they
yeah,
apply it
exactly,
to politics, yeah.
exactly. So
A lot
if you
of it is
start,
psychology, so mm,
they exactly that's what I wanted to say. Like they provide insights into human nature. So it's not so much of what is their proposition ultimately, like what system do they want to see if things were to go their way, but rather
mhm,
how they have understood the human condition. And of course, what kind of lessons they have learned from that, what kind of
exactly, yeah.
inferences they have drawn. For example, there is Plato, which in Greek we call Platon, who
Mhm,
has this famous book called The Republic.
mhm.
And it's a book about a republic, but of course, it's nominally about a republic because much of it is about ethics and about how do people behave
Yeah,
and
mhm,
how should we understand people, and given that, what kind of society we should have. So even if you say, you know what, I disagree with Platon's program, with his
mhm.
ideal society, you cannot just say because I disagree with that, therefore
Yeah,
I dismiss all his insights.
no, you can't. I
Yeah.
agree with you. Mhm.
And
I fully agree.
there are many thinkers which I think fall in that category, where it's like, of course, insightful, but maybe I don't agree fully. And
Yeah,
you could go from antiquity, for example, Platon and Aristotle would
I know
fit
that.
this group. Yeah, there is another one, which is what Matt Mullenweg was referring to, called Thucydides in English.
Mhm.
Thucydides, we say in Greek.
Yeah, that one,
And
if you said Greek, I wouldn't know who that was. But yeah, I've could you maybe, give me an idea of what he said? Because I'm not as familiar.
so he was a historian, and he was describing what is known as the Peloponnesian War, which
Okay,
you can understand like the big war of the era, the regional war between the two superpowers.
okay.
In, of course, the small geography of Greece, but the
Yeah,
two superpowers of the region. And part of it, of course, is historical, like what happened, what were they doing, what were the battles, and all that. But
Hmm.
again, a part of it is insights into the nature of people. So there is this
Yeah.
famous one, which it's still influential, which is like, maybe you have heard it like this: the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. There is a
Yeah.
saying like that. It's not
Hmm.
written exactly that way, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, I
So
might have read it that way because in
there
English.
is another part though. So
Mhm.
people tend to quote this. It's like, oh, the strong do whatever they want, there is no morality. But then
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is another part, which is in that discussion, what they are saying is that morality, or our notion of justice anyway, exists between equals.
Okay.
So if we don't think of ourselves as equal, then of course we don't have a moral basis that is common to us.
Agreed.
So, for as long as we think of ourselves as equals, then we can start talking about justice, whatever justice means to us. But it's a
I
prerequisite. So, I think that's an interesting insight. And of course, it's an insight that is incorporated, for example, in the Constitution of the United States, where all
Yeah.
people have inalienable fundamental rights. Like, it's not about if the majority doesn't feel like it, you don't have a right to liberty and freedom of religion, etc.
I agree, yeah. So, I think I wanted to, like, touch on that point where you were like, "All people are equal," because there was a I would say that the fact that different definitions of people pretty much existed throughout history has more than anything influenced, I would say, the way that society has evolved more so than, like, any particular law itself, like you said. So, when you said in the United States Constitution, for example, when they said people, they weren't including women and they weren't including slaves. So those were, I would say, two things that changed history. Like when, you know, liberation of slaves happened, when Black people or generally people who were enslaved were considered free citizens and they were given equal rights. And then when women were given equal rights, they were allowed to vote. So it was, I will say that it was those two things more than anything else that changed the entire political landscape, not because a particular law or a particular right given to people changed, but because the definition of people who are considered equal changed. Mm.
And that's a key point. That's correct. But it speaks exactly to the fact that if you rewind history and you go back to that era, uh,
Mhm.
the concept of equal was there, but it had a different meaning. So
Yeah,
justice, in that sense, was applying between those that were considered equal. So of course the white men, and
yeah,
then through political struggles, it got expanded to cover all the other groups of people.
yeah. Mhm.
So
I
that's a
agree.
key insight, of course. And there is the other thing, which is it doesn't matter what a piece of paper, whether you call it sacrosanct or not, such as the Constitution, it doesn't matter what it says ultimately. Because if people are not willing to uphold it, it
Mhm.
won't fight for itself.
That's
Like,
what happened a few
yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. So of course there is that. But the point is this: that there is truth to be had in interpretation. I think
Yeah.
this is a phrase that I forget who it is now. A famous American law scholar said, "There is truth to be had in
Okay.
interpretation." I forget. I will. Yeah, I have to check. I will say the name wrong, so I don't want to. Yeah, but a famous
Okay.
scholar of the 20th century. But
Okay.
I think there is a point there. Like, of course, there is the letter of the law, like all people are equal, and
Mhm.
then there is, okay, who are the people?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And what does equal entail? What does that
Mhm.
mean?
You must have seen the like famous quote. I think it's like the George Orwell. He's like, all everybody's equal, but some are more equal than others. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I
mhm.
believe that's in the Animal Farm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So some animals are more equal than others. And
Mm.
I think that's a wonderful insight. Um,
Yeah.
because, of course, it speaks to what happens when you have collusion or when you have institutional capture, as they say. So, where
Yeah.
a group of people will run the government in service of their own interests. So, of
Yeah.
course, when that
Exactly.
happens, some animals will be more equal than the other animals in the farm.
Yeah, but it's actually, like, I think that that book is really genius, and, like, it again, it's not very long, but I feel like it's one of those novels that everybody should read, you know?
Hmm.
Like, even more so than 1984, because 1984 is considered, like, required reading in a lot of schools. I don't really see that about Animal Farm, and I feel like that's, if anything, more insightful. 1984 is your typical dystopian story, which
Hmm.
it's good. It's really good. It's very entertaining. But I would say, as far as like what's a book that will really like change your perspective, especially if you read it as a high schooler or something, it would be Animal Farm. Um,
Yeah, good point. Good point. And
yeah.
I like that way of writing as well, where it's
Oh
not
yeah.
really verbose and dense and really technical, and you have to check the dictionary every couple of lines to see if
Mhm.
you understand the word or not. It's not like that. It's easy to read. It's straight to the point, and I
Yeah.
think it communicates the message with great effect.
Yeah. Exactly. So again, like, this might be like pivoting the topic a little
Hmm.
bit like entirely, but you mentioned like looking up things in the dictionary and stuff. So I just wanted to like ask, what was your journey learning English like? Or did you like always did you grow up speaking English, or was it something that you learned as an adult? And what was that like? Because I do see that you write in English on your blog, and almost all, I mean, all the interviews on your channel are also in English. So I'm sure it's not your native language, it's not your first language. So how was your process with that?
So my mother tongue is Greek, so I grew up in Greece.
Hmm.
I learned English at school. We were
Okay.
taught, but they don't teach you high level stuff. It's basic stuff just for you to
Mhm.
be able to talk to a tourist and give instructions, or okay, turn left and head to where the
Yeah, yeah.
cafeteria
Mhm.
is, that sort of thing. But uh, what I did was to try to learn more myself. I would try to talk in English to practice. Of course, many parts of Greece are tourist attractions. So I got to talk with a lot of tourists as a
Mhm.
teenager, for example.
Yeah.
And part of that is an exercise in English, and I really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Then I worked as a bartender for many years, which of course is in the tourism industry mainly, not exclusively, but
Yeah.
mainly, where I would be dealing with English speakers all the time while I was
Okay.
there. And my colleagues were also English speakers because they were from different parts of the European Union, such as
Mhm.
Lithuania, Poland, the Czech Republic, today called Czechia,
Yeah.
and many other countries of the European Union. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I will also write in English because I want to practice it further and be as
Mhm.
good as I can. And also,
Yeah.
that's why I do videos in English. That was the original motivation. I didn't have.
That's what I was gonna say. I wonder if that was part of, like, maybe learning English better was part of your, part of what led to the creation of this channel, or what led to the creation of your blog, because I do find that very interesting. I do find that with a lot of, like, European bloggers and content creators is that they choose to, like, they originally start in their own language, and then they choose to branch out into English just to, like, get a broader audience, and I think that that's definitely very respectable, because 'cause I've never learned a language as an adult. I would like to try, but I don't think that I mean, I just haven't done it. So I do think that that's something that I find very fascinating.
I
But
think for English speakers is a little bit more difficult, like native speakers,
gotcha.
because everywhere you go, everybody will greet you in English. So it's
That
very
makes
hard for
sense.
you to be incentivized or nudged or forced to try in
That
a
makes
different
sense,
language.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So, at least for me, like, I was born in the US, but I grew up in India for a lot of my life because my parents were immigrants who, for their own personal reasons, they decided to move back to India when, my sister and I were both little kids. So I grew up there, and I went to a school where there were a lot of other kids who were also like transplants, like who were born in the US, and they'd moved back. So at least my year, my specific kind of like set of people that I ended up interacting with in school, like at elementary school, middle school, those kind of years, there were a lot of people who would just speak English to each other, and they would pretty much talk the way that I'm talking right now, even though it was in India. So I would say that, like, I always had, like, a group of friends who I could just speak English with. But when it comes to communication with most of the locals in any part of India, you have to learn the regional language, which luckily I already knew because my parents spoke that language. So I did grow up learning. I kind of grew up speaking both English and Marathi. That's the name of the language that the people in my family speak. Um, so I am fluent in it speech wise, but I'm not fluent with reading or writing it. I'm only fluent with English
Yeah.
for that. So,
Hmm.
um,
And how is India in terms, because of course India was a colony of the British Empire before
yeah.
it gained independence. Um,
Mhm.
is English still recognized as slash official language or not?
So
If you
India
know.
actually recognizes only English as its official
Ooh.
language because the regional parts of India won't like South India won't like it if you make Hindi the official language because many South Indians don't speak Hindi, and there are also many like other like parts. Every part of India has its own language, kind of. There's thousands, I think, um, and thousands of little languages. They're not. Some are dialects, but some are not dialects. Some are just like completely different languages, and like the population of India can't really decide on one language that they all want to like one Indian language that they all want to claim as their the official language of the country because for any language that you speak, a good number of people in India would not be able to speak it. So, I mean, it's a very I think India is a very interesting case study for just how diverse one country can be while still being one country. Like I have friends in the US who are like, "Oh, so do you can you compare it to, like, the difference between, say, California and Texas?" And I'm like,
Uh,
"No, it's really nothing like that." If you look at the US, it's still much, much more similar to like, all parts of the US are much more similar to each other. There might be subtle variations, but in India, it's like if you go from one end of India to the other end, you'll feel like you're in a completely different country. So,
mhm, mhm,
like, unless you already knew that you're still in the same country, you would just feel like you're somewhere else. And I feel like a lot of people who grow up in a more homogenous country, like say the US is not homogenous like as far as like racial or ethnic diversity or that kind of thing, but I will say that in terms of language and culture, it's much more homogenous than a country like India. So a lot of American friends that I have don't fully understand this concept, I would say. Like the fact that you can be in one country and still have nothing in common with someone in the next state even.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
yeah.
And what do you think binds those diverse groups of people together? Of course, there is a shared history, a shared historical trajectory. I
Mhm.
imagine there are shared traditions, like culturally they have similarities, even if there are big differences. Of course, I know that there is a majority religion and then minority religions, but how different are those? Are they reconcilable?
So again, different people will give you different answers on that. I think that um yes, the majority of the population does practice Hinduism. And I would say that a lot of India is pretty unified in like their religious pride, I would guess. And then there's also like not so good aspects of Hindu I wouldn't even say they're aspects of Hinduism, but they are parts of the Indian culture that have, that still are unfortunately a problem, like the caste system, which is still something that a lot of Indian people have to deal with. Um, and then there's the fact that Hinduism has a bunch of rituals and a bunch of things that pretty much most parts of India, I would say, no matter how different they are in the way that they practice them, they do practice them in some or the other way. So I would say like shared problems is honestly one, and shared culture, shared traditions is another. And then as far as the minority religions go, I will say there has been a lot of conflict of between different religions in India. I personally think that these are more political. Like these are more things that are happening at the political level than it is people just hating each other, like, mutually because they're different religions. That doesn't happen. Like, Islam is kind of one of the minority religions, and then there's, like, some Christianity and some Buddhism, or, like, Sikhs. There's a big population of Sikhs in India. There's a big population of Jains in India. There's a big population of a lot of little religions along with Hindus, but I would say Hinduism and Islam are probably the biggest. But and that too, Hinduism by a landslide. And then there's like a lot of political conflicts, some of which say things like, there's a political party which currently their reputation in India is that they are, Hindu nationalists, meaning that they want all of India to have Hindu customs and Hindu culture. Um, there's another side which I wouldn't say that they're necessarily more accepting, but they are accepting in response to this side being opinionated a certain way. Um, Now, I am not the most informed on Indian politics or Indian history that leads to this current, you know, situation in Indian politics. So I guess like whatever I say about this should be taken with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
but I do think that it's a very complicated cultural like environment or political landscape. Um, and anyone who wants to have an opinion on it, including me, anyone who wants to have an opinion on it should be pretty well researched in the topic, because I think that there's a lot of people in the West, especially who try to like use Western styles of thinking and apply them to India, which don't really work. And I can see why. I can see where they're coming from when they make arguments like that. But I just don't think that it's a one-to-one mapping. Like this person who had this particular ideology in the US or in Europe or anywhere directly maps onto this other person in India who has this similar ideology. It doesn't really work like that because it doesn't really allow it. So I would say another thing that unifies a lot of the Indian population is just their distaste for being viewed through a Western lens, kind of. They don't like it. They
mm-hmm,
want to be respected as their own set of people, I would say.
mm-hmm,
Mm, mm,
mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course that has far-reaching implications. But I think what you said here is key, because it's very easy to flatten the differences between people. It's very easy
yeah.
to think that, oh, how we are here is how people are everywhere and how people have always been.
Mhm.
So there is no cultural specificities and there is no historical trajectory that underpins those. And
Yeah.
when you do that, eventually, of course, you are so simplistic that we go back to that point about the vibes, where it's like, oh, it would be
Yeah.
very nice if they had done such and such. Oh, yeah, sure.
Mhm.
If you ignore all those important details.
Yeah, exactly. So, I will definitely say that's one thing that unifies Indians. They don't like
Hmm.
their culture being framed like that, but nobody would. So, I mean, like, yeah,
Hmm. Hmm. And I
but
mean, it
anyway,
makes sense. It makes
I
sense
think I gave
because, yeah, sorry.
no, no, I said I think I went on a pretty long, rambly explanation for what was supposed to be a simple question, but I do that a lot, so
That's fine. That's fine because part of these talks is to go with the flow and see where we end up in. And I think that's fun because there is an authenticity to the discussion. It's not like, okay, we reached this milestone, let's continue to the other topic. And
Oh, yeah,
let's,
yeah.
which of course has its use. I'm not saying that it's useless, but I think
Mhm.
here I like this style.
Yeah, yeah. So,
If I can pivot now to a topic then,
oh, sorry, yeah, yeah.
because I'm curious about art. So, of course, you are drawing
Oh,
now.
yeah.
How did that happen? Did you have an interest in artistic forms of artistic expression? Were you doing it for a long time? What kind of art interests you?
I've always been drawing, I would say, since I was, like, a very little kid, pretty much since I knew how to hold a pencil, which was I don't know, how old are you when you do that? 3, 4?
Yeah.
Um, I've been, I've always been, like, doing little scribbles and doodles, and growing up, I would always, like, make my little characters and draw them. I like, it would be stupid stuff, like, I'd read, like, fairy tales, like princess stories or whatever, and I would be like, "I'm gonna invent my own princess now," and then I would draw it. Like, it was just that kind of thing, the way that any kid would probably start drawing. But I think that the real thing that maybe sets me apart from some people, like a lot of people who draw like in a similar way as kids, is that I continue to do it as an adult. And here's where I'm gonna like again pivot the conversation to something that might not be the original question, but
No
um
problem.
so my parents are Indian, but I think that a lot of Indian or Asian parents in general, or even like these days, even like, you know, American parents or however, tend to want their kids to get into particular hobbies. Like there'll be many parents who push their kids into drawing. They're like, you have to do this.
Mm,
Or, into learning a musical instrument. They'll be like, you have to do this. Or into sports for that matter. They'll be like, you have to go, play soccer after school or however. And I will say that most of the kids that I grew up around who had parents asking them to be drawing or be, singing, playing instruments, playing sports, however, they ended up not retaining those hobbies. Whereas for me, I would say my parents didn't care. They were just like, as long as you're doing the bare minimum, you're going to like school, you're learning the material, you're getting good grades in your classes. That's all that really matters. You don't need to have 20 other hobbies on top. Like your childhood is for you to just have fun. That was my parents like mindset, and I feel like ironically enough that mindset led me to actually have a lot of hobbies that I carried into adulthood, because anything that I did, including drawing, or like I also like singing, I'm also into music. All of that stuff is stuff that I decided to do by myself, and not stuff that my parents made me do at any point. Mm,
mhm, mhm.
so
And I think that's a great way of into parenting, but also into treating people in general, which is allow the person to express that which is innate, that which they have an inclination towards, that which
yeah, exactly.
feels natural to them. And there is also this idea, I think, which is consistent with trying to force kids into specific fields, which
Hmm.
is that it's about the outcomes. Like these are instrumentalized in the service of some goal, where it's like, well,
Yeah.
if you go into, I don't know, art, then you will have a way of thinking pictorially. So now you will enrich your logical thinking with, I don't
Oh,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
trying to make something up now, of course, but maybe it
I
doesn't
understand what you're
work.
saying, yeah.
But the idea is that it's in the service of something else. So the hobby isn't an end in itself. You don't do it because you
Yeah,
like it. You do it because it's, let's say, a productivity boost. It's
and
something,
yeah,
yeah.
I hate that too. Like, I hate it when everything has to become about some kind of deeper meaning or some kind of like, um yeah, you're doing this to like upskill on in this other yeah, I do think that like that isn't the correct way, at least for kids. Like when you're older, it makes sense if you decide to like start things that you wanna do on your own for reasons like that. For example, I have never been into sports. I know you are, you're pretty
Yeah.
athletic.
Hmm.
Um, you have, like, articles about that on your blog and stuff as well. Um, but I have never been athletic. I've never been into sports. My parents didn't make me do it. Again, that's one thing that they didn't make me do, and as a result, I didn't do it. And as an adult now, I'm starting to try to maybe do a little bit more athletic activity than I used to before, which was basically nothing. Um, so and that I would say is for self-improvement and for socialization. It's because like
Hmm.
it's a good way to like meet friends, and to have an active lifestyle is a good way to like socialize. That
Hmm.
but I do think that framing it that way to a kid is not going to help.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it doesn't resonate with them. Like they don't feel anything. It's like, oh, I don't care about what you're saying. Like, and
It
of
almost
course they
becomes
cannot
funny.
reason about the end state.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
well, what you are saying now sounds really vague. I have no idea what it means to be a professional 20 years from now. Like, I'm just a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it was never framed that way to me. In fact, like,
Hmm.
when I was considering I really wanted to be an artist, like, after, high school, my parents were like, so what do you want to do now? And I wanted to be an artist. My parents kind of discouraged that. Actually, they pushed me into engineering because they thought that it would be more useful, which again, like I would say some parents do that in a way that's maybe a little too pushy, but my parents weren't like that. They were like they were always supportive of what I wanted to do, but they just like laid the options on the table. They were like, here's realistically what will happen if you end up pursuing art versus if you pursue something technical, which will actually like that. Here's what your lifestyle would look like, because some fields just pay more. That's like the harsh reality of like the way that the world is. So that's why they pushed me into technical stuff, and I ended up liking it. Like I enjoy programming too. Like I enjoy both. In fact, I would say that like it, it's almost good, I think, for a person. Now, it doesn't have to be something that you do professionally necessarily, but I do think it's good for people to have a combination of like artistic activities and technical activities in their day-to-day kind of like lifestyle. You should kind of be thinking both ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. And of course, one informs the other. There is
Oh yeah, for
also
sure.
something to be said about the word recreational. So these are
Mhm.
recreational activities we say often, and we
Yeah.
mean the hobbies that we do.
Yeah.
And if even if you approach it from a productivity standpoint, which I don't advocate for, but let's for the
Mhm.
sake of the discussion,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Mhm.
say, you know what, I'm interested in maximizing my productivity. Well, you
Mhm.
need to take breaks. You
Oh yeah.
need to have something that recreates you, so it has that recreational effect. It's the
Mhm.
same as with sport. If you want to be fit, for example, you cannot just train all day, because that
Yeah.
will lead to burnout. You will be injured. You have to
Mhm.
train, you have to rest, and recovery is as important as exercise. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like you can skip it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think of course there is much to be said about having generally a rounded kind of experience. And this also
I agree.
connects to
Yeah.
what you were saying earlier about the interview, where there is of course the technical part of what
Mhm.
your job is about, but then there is the people side, the social part.
Yeah.
And you cultivate that through experiences such as what you described, or more generally, recreational activities.
Yeah. Mhm. I agree. So I think that I'm actually one of those people. Like, and if you've interviewed some of my you've interviewed Eric, he's my friend. If you ask these people, like, they will say that I'm actually someone who doesn't rest enough. Like, I'm someone who is a little bit too obsessed with not necessarily productivity, but like having a thing that I'm doing that I can like describe at every moment of the day.
Hmm.
I don't want to like just sit and chill. Um, like, at any point, really. Even, like I mean, again, like, this is not I'm not trying to, like, use this as, like, just to say that I shouldn't have done it, but, I mean, like, I feel like even this interview is kind of an example of it where I'm like, "Well, in the middle of this interview, I'm also going to be drawing a portrait." Like, I'm
Yeah,
mm,
yeah. That's a busy bee, as it were.
yeah, so
um,
I tend to do that a lot, and I
mhm,
think that that's actually something that is a good message for me because I'm definitely one of those people that doesn't like to slow down, and, does it lead would it lead to burnout? Well, I haven't had that happen yet, but it might if, like it can for anyone if they're not careful, so I do think that that is definitely something that you shouldn't nobody should really be losing sight of, if that makes sense.
mhm, mhm.
Like you just said, that resting is also important.
And
Um
what you described about yourself is also a descriptor for me. I am exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Mhm,
I never sit still. I have to do something always. Like it's basically
mhm,
the same. What helps, I think, to avoid
mhm.
burnout is to remain mindful of your emotional state. Like, do I
Yeah,
like what I am doing? Like, because if you are mindlessly doing it, then you are burning out without realizing, as it were. Like, there is a
that makes
slow
sense, yeah.
burning fire and you don't even notice it. So
Mhm,
it helps to check from time to time and be like, okay, is this something I am interested in doing, to continue doing? Is this,
mhm.
how do I feel about it?
Yeah, yeah.
And having that self reflection, I think, ultimately keeps you fresh and you keep
Mhm,
going. And even if you are super busy, ultimately it doesn't harm
mhm. That makes sense, yeah, that's actually a really good point. So again, like I'm just so curious to hear more about this or like talk more about this, but
Hmm.
mostly because I would say that in most of my like day-to-day conversations with friends and stuff, I don't really get to discuss this very much. But back to what you were saying about like your political kind of like philosophy and that kind of thing. Um so like could you describe to me or like maybe tell me like what some of the issues are on which maybe you have a very strong opinion or maybe an opinion that might be a little bit controversial or maybe not even necessarily controversial. It can be an opinion that you just think you're very passionate about that opinion on any issue. And could you expand on that a little bit more for
Hmm.
me? Then like I can provide.
Mhm. So I used to have really strong opinions about everything. I used to be headstrong
Mhm.
and opinionated and argumentative.
Yeah.
But eventually I learned to take a step back and to withhold ultimate judgment. In other
Yeah. Mhm.
words, to observe how things work and try to understand if I were to do them, how would I do them differently given the prevailing conditions? And
Okay.
having
Makes
that
sense.
thought experiment uh, grounds you in the reality of the here and now, where it's like I can no longer think in terms of my ideal framework, in terms of
Yeah.
what are the available resources, what are the states of affairs.
Hmm.
Given this, well, what are the options and what do those entail?
Like implementation, like we talked
And
about.
then
Yeah.
we go back to the implementation and thinking in terms of that kind of work, where
Yeah.
once you do that, of course, you can still have sensitivities and opinions, but you understand that you cannot just wish for things.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
let's say just a random thing. Oh, I wish that tomorrow India implements uniformity for all its citizens. Like, that would be very nice for them. They won't have anything to fight about, blah, blah, blah. Of
Yeah.
course, maybe you say, I wish for that to happen. It's very good. There are many benefits, blah, blah, blah. Well, how
Yeah.
do you actually go about it? If you start thinking about it, okay, what resources do you have? If we were to put you in the relevant ministry, what would you do?
Mhm.
Step one, two, three. Please outline it. And I think
Yeah.
once you think in those terms, you start not
Your opinion
saying
starts falling
much.
apart. Yeah, the
Yeah,
argument starts to fall apart because it's
yeah,
like, yes, maybe you want that, but you can't do it, so does it really matter? Like, yeah, it starts to become
yeah.
yeah.
And one relatively strong opinion I have still is about
Mhm.
the European Union. So I
Okay.
am torn. I am conflicted because, on the one hand, I have a cosmopolitan outlook, or let's say Europeanist outlook, where I
Mhm.
want the people of Europe to collaborate. I want them to be in good terms with each other, eventually for the wider region, not just Europeans. So, for example, all of the Mediterranean and so on. Generally, for people to be peaceful and communicate, keep the communication going, keep the commerce going, and
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah.
That's my outlook. That's what I like. But then I see
Mhm.
that the European Union has certain mechanisms where it has the adverse effect,
Okay.
where because of the balance of power, because of the historical trajectory of the European integration process, as it is known, meaning
Mhm.
the evolution of the European Union from where it
Yeah.
was to where it is now, because of that historicity, you have a certain constellation of forces
Okay.
which creates certain outcomes and precludes others.
Okay.
And we saw this a lot, and we see this still with divisions that exist in Europe along geographic lines, such as what was known during the financial crisis of post 2008 as the core of Europe and the periphery. And the
Mhm.
periphery encompassed Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland. And
Oh,
then, of course,
interesting.
depending on how you frame it, it could be other countries as well. Um, we still see similar tensions now in how the European Union wants to integrate its fiscal policy, not to go into the technicalities, but
Sure.
basically for them to have a common budget, which they
Okay.
don't really have now. It's much more complicated. But
Mhm.
for them to have a common budget and a common treasury, like there is in the
Okay.
United States, a treasury, which is the counterparty to the Federal Reserve Bank. We
Yeah.
don't
Mhm.
have that in Europe.
Oh,
So
I see. Okay.
having that is, of course, a really tough sell for certain countries versus other countries. Because, for example, the Germans will say, hey, hold on a second. we are fiscally conservative slash disciplined here. And the French, our fellow neighbors over there, they are frivolous and they
Mhm.
spend more than they can. They live beyond their means. So why
Mhm.
should we bankroll French debt? Ultimately, it's that. Of course, now I
Yeah.
am simplifying the argument, but the idea is
Yeah.
this. And a part of me wishes that we could just start from scratch and be like, you know what,
Yeah.
let's do it again. But of course, that's not realistic. So in
Mhm.
practice, I'm like, okay, this is what we have. What
Yeah.
can we do given the available resources? And
Yeah.
the only path forward to have the Europeanist outlook that I was explaining is how it is nowadays, where they want to do a military union. So they want to have
Yeah.
greater capacities for not necessarily European army, but a coordination among European armies, that
Mhm.
sort of thing, that in the long term could become a single army. But
Gotcha.
that has, as with everything in life, that has knock on effects where you
Mhm.
want to do something. Of course, you have to do other things that are ancillary to it.
Yeah.
So for you to have like a common army, well, how do you finance the common army? So you have to have a common mechanism for doing that. And
Yeah.
again, not to go into the technicalities, but the point is that maybe in practice, even though this looks ugly, like why would you be pro military, pro war, or whatever? In
Mhm.
practice, it can still lead to a good outcome, all things
Oh,
considered.
yeah. I actually wanted to ask a question about that. So, one opinion I hear in the US a lot is that now I can't say whether I agree or disagree. I kind of see both sides a little bit of this opinion, but an opinion that I do see thrown around a lot in the US is that the the EU, like Europe, is too dependent on the American military. Would you say that that's something that you agree with? And would you say that it's something that you like the argument that you just gave about the EU military? Would you say that it's something that you want to like move away from? You want the EU to like militarize themselves and become self-sufficient in that sense, because technically if there's a Russian invasion for whatever reason, then the US is not going to be the first to get hit. It's going to be those European countries. So there's many people who say in the US that it's not our job, it's their job. Now, yes, NATO exists, but NATO is pretty much just the US protecting everybody else at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your opinion on that?
Mm-hmm. I think if you take it as a descriptive statement, it's true in the sense that, of course, America is having forces, deployed forces all over the continent. So, in that sense, of course, the continent is dependent on the US. But I think um, it is dishonest in the sense that
Okay.
we are ignoring the historical context of the US wanting that to be the outcome. They didn't want to
Exactly.
they wanted to have influence in Europe because, of course, of the Cold War. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that they were malevolent in that regard, but they had an
Yeah.
interest in that being the case, and for
Mhm.
them to have bases all around Europe.
Mhm.
Furthermore, American bases in Europe have the effect of projecting power beyond Europe. For
Yes.
example, if you are doing something in the Middle East, you
Mhm.
have a retreat closer to home than if you didn't have those bases. So you can
Yeah, yeah.
retreat back to Europe. You don't have to retreat all the way back to the States.
Mhm.
So that projects force well beyond the confines of the European continent. And
Agree.
that is a point that if you don't make, then of course what you are saying is true, but it's half truth. It's in a way you are
Yeah, I don't
twisting
I
the
don't
facts.
agree with it, like, I don't fully agree with it, I also don't fully disagree with it. I
Mm-hmm.
have my own thoughts, which are, like, pretty much like you said. And that's another thing, like, I feel like right now I asked you a very specific question, but I feel like one thing I've noticed again in the current, like, landscape of political thought is that people need to like, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people really need to organize themselves into tribes. There is no such thing as seeing both sides of an issue anymore. It's either I fully support this or I don't. And sometimes it goes beyond individual issues and even gets to like parties themselves. It's like either you support everything that the left says and you become an extremist, or you support everything that the right says and you become an extremist. And I think that that's just so unproductive. And I think that that's pretty much what's causing most of the political rot that's happening all over the world, which is that people are not thinking critically about the issues anymore. They're not able to have a nuanced opinion on one issue. They're not even able to have split opinions across issues and say, this is what I feel about this thing, and this is what I feel about this other thing, and these two can coexist. And in the end of the day, I'm a person. I'm not like, just a checkbox on like a party's ballot. So you need to be able to say, that I believe in some things that this group supports, and I believe in some things that this other group supports. And sometimes I might be split, and that's okay. But I feel like the idea that people can think like that is slowly vanishing because at least here in the US, all political discourse is becoming very emotional. It's becoming about like maybe it's always been that way. I can't say for sure, but maybe I'm just one of those people who's like it was better in the past, which everybody ever has said that. But like I
Yes, of
mean,
course, it was the best.
I yeah, but I mean like of course, it's not across the board. There are many, many ways in which the state of the world now is much better than it was like 20, 30, 40 years ago. I'm not saying that I want to return to that. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm saying that like certain things with political discourse, especially now that it's moved to social media platforms and now any idiot on Twitter is like, is someone who can talk and people will hear. Um, that's led to, I would say, the general IQ level around political discussion dropping a lot. And now it's just like who can shout the loudest and who can make people feel the best. And if you manage to do that, you get these people to join your tribe. And no one's actually thinking critically about any of the issues. That's how I feel it's become. Maybe it's always been that way. Maybe it's just that now because of social media and the internet, the perception of that is amplified. But I guess like I would like to know what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on
Hmm.
that? Is it
Hmm.
similar in the EU to like what I'm describing? Because what I'm describing is very US centric. Would you say it's similar all over the world? Or would you say that maybe it's just an America problem, or maybe do you have like a
Hmm.
counterpoint?
Hmm. So two big things here. First, there is the electoral systems, which
Mhm.
themselves already precondition politics a certain way. If how you count the votes, of course, this is a very technical topic that goes into
Sure,
statistics,
yeah.
but basically, how you count the votes gives you different majorities. So in America, the system you have is district
The electoral
representation. Yeah, yeah, but basically you cannot have a multi-party system in practice because you don't have a proportional representation. You cannot have a scenario where a small party wins a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit elsewhere, and gets into Congress.
yeah.
So you don't have that. So of course that effectively gives you a permanent two-party system. And that's why in the States you have this phenomenon of the so-called big tent, where both parties are inclusive of different currents of ideology within them. They are not monolithic, so they have their differences. These differences are, of course, flattened nowadays, and this goes to the second part, which is in the internet in general. Which I think what it has done, it has shrinked the space time of politics, if that makes sense. And what I mean by
Oh,
this,
yeah. That's a really good point. Mhm.
it's like everything that happens instantly, so there isn't like a travel time, and it
Yeah.
feels proximate, it's like next to me. So
Mm.
I am always in this news cycle of constant churning of information, and I get the feeling that there is imminent calamity, and unless
Mhm.
I pick my side in a crude fashion, as you described, the tribe, then we are heading towards our doom. And I think this is hard to reverse. It's hard
Mhm.
to change this because, of course, you can deal with the electoral systems. You can change how people are represented and what representative means. But
Mhm.
it's very hard, I think, to change the technology, because the technology now creates its own realities. In
Yeah.
Europe, we have more pluralist systems, in the sense that
Yeah.
there are multi-party systems. That's the norm.
Mhm.
And you will see in
It
many
is.
countries that it's not one government, sorry, it's not one party that governs, it's a
Mhm.
coalition
Yeah.
in many countries.
Mhm.
This is possible because of how the votes are counted fundamentally.
Mhm.
And maybe it's also possible because we haven't yet reached that point where people are as invested in social media as they are in the States. Maybe.
Oh,
I'm not sure
interesting.
about that.
Okay. Would you say
Um,
the language barrier is part of that? Because most of that stuff tends to be in English. Like, is that part of why?
Yes, yes. Though what I am seeing, of course, I don't have a picture of the whole, but the
Mhm.
trends I sense is that we are moving more towards a meme-based way of doing things. And by meme here, I mean the mimetic behaviors, where
Yeah, yeah.
somebody says something and it's the lowest common denominator around which people can agree on, and then everybody
Mhm.
repeats that. And that doesn't really scale, because what you will get is politicians, such as in Cyprus, there is one such person who is a social media persona.
Okay.
Politicians who present themselves effectively as managers of public opinion. It's
Oh,
like, I don't have any opinions. You will tell me what the opinions are, and I will just implement them. So I will just be doing the legwork, as it were. And I think that is not constructive, because fundamentally people are not well informed of all the topics. They cannot
yeah,
have
that's when Brexit happened.
insightful, yeah,
Yeah.
they cannot have an insightful opinion about everything. Like a politician has to be there. Like, I agree with you, Mr. or Mrs. Politician or whatever. I agree with you on certain principles, and then I expect you, based on those principles, to figure out the technicalities.
Mhm.
I, as a person who has a job and a life outside of politics, I cannot be keeping up with everything. So
I
there
agree.
is also a division of labor in that regard.
I
And
agree.
I think when we reduce everything to a memes based decision making, ultimately that goes to what you were saying, which is the quality of the discourse degenerates, it deteriorates. And
I
eventually we oscillate between the extremes.
Yep. So, yeah, because it's just like in the end, tribalism or like meme-based discourse, like you said, it's in the end of the day, it's like you said, you hear something and then you repeat it. This is the kind of thing that becomes much more effective. Like as a system, it becomes more effective when there's just the maximum number of people repeating it. And that's why it makes the most sense to just divide your population into two parts that are fighting against each other and everybody's in one tribe or the other, rather than if you had three or four, the system would just not be as strong. It'll still collapse to the two main rivals, I think, if you have a situation like that. Where it's so much easier to like, you know, band like, I don't know, buddy up with half the population and yell at the other side. As opposed to if there were bigger groups based off of more nuanced things.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
because in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
end, I feel like emotional offense or like shouting is emotional offense or shouting. It doesn't matter if your argument's intelligent at that point. It just um So, yeah, it does seem though like maybe it's not as bad in the EU from what you're describing, but it seems like you're trying to say that it's getting there. It's getting to the same
Yeah.
level as the US.
It's
Yeah.
more fragmented in that regard. Depending on where you look and what you want to check for, you will get different results. But I will say no, it's not as extreme. In the US, I feel it's too extreme. Like, it's like reason went out of the window. It's like, oh,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
out of here. You can keep talking, but I'm leaving.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm starting to like I'm definitely like very disappointed in the way that things are going. Again, it's not just about like who might be in power or whether I agree or disagree with them. It's also just about like the way that people are getting there. Um and the fact that it's just not intelligent anymore. It's not interesting, it's not intelligent. And honestly, that hurts, like that's actually going to hurt the system even more because I feel like so many smart people are just like checking out. They're saying I don't care. And and when people who are actually like somewhat aware of what's going on say that, when people who are, they're like, okay, I can think critically, but because I can think critically, I think all of this is stupid and I just choose to completely disengage. If that's your opinion, if that's what you choose to do, then the entire pool, if everyone starts doing that, everyone who is smart starts doing that, then the lowest common denominator gets even lower. Like, I mean, it's almost like a self reinforcing kind of cycle where the stupider the public platform discourse gets, the more smart people are checking out of it. And then as a result, it gets even stupider. Like, I think
Hmm.
that, hmm, which is why I think that one of my maybe slightly different opinions, maybe compared to a lot of people of my age, I would say, is it's important to talk about politics. Like, I think that there's many people who are just like, that doesn't concern me. It's a vibe killer. I don't want to talk about it. It's not fun. It's not interesting. But I'm like, if everyone starts doing that, if you're smart and you start doing that, then it's going to get even worse. And in the end of the day, it is like the thing that keeps your country a country. It's a thing that keeps your country functioning. And to participate in politics is pretty much something you should be doing. Like, I wouldn't say that it's not. Yes, it's not a constitutional duty or anything, but like, it is something that I believe that every citizen should be doing, just because they are a citizen, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
And I think what contributes to this apathy, effectively, where people just
apathy. Yes.
withdraw, is the fact that we don't have an appreciation of the history of, well, how did we get the rights that we have now? How did we get the
Yeah,
lifestyle
exactly.
that we enjoy now? It didn't just come from the sky.
Yeah.
It came through a lot of struggles. It wasn't a given. And if you think that it is a given, if you think that it cannot possibly be taken away, then of course that's when it will be taken away.
Exactly. And you could see that with so many things that have kind of been happening in the US lately. Like, about, 5 years ago at this point, 4 years ago at this point, or sorry, 5 years ago, January 6th happened. And that was literally a group of people trying to disrupt, trying to overturn this idea, like the constitutional idea that power needs to be handed over from the previous president to the next president when someone new has won the election. It's it started there, and then it just gotten more and more insidious. Like, I mean, think about the fact that everybody was shouting back and forth about issues which I think were more, I would say they're more hype than substance, I would say. And I'm not gonna like name what the issues were. I feel like that might create a lot of angry people. But I'm gonna say that, like, it's when people are arguing about irrelevant things that the real damage starts to happen. For example, look at Roe v. Wade getting overturned, for like the abortion law in the US getting overturned. That was a pretty big thing, I think, that no one was talking about it at all until after it happened. It was just kind of like in everyone's blind spot because people were too busy talking about things that, were not immediate and not realistic and not implementable, like you said. Um, Similarly, in the US shutdown that happened like a few months ago, the October November shutdown, it was not even like on anyone's radar that like they're trying to cut SNAP benefits until they started doing it, until they said that they would do it, and then it became like, a an uproar kind of situation. But I feel like the reason why this stuff is happening is because everyone's just focused on like the scandals, and people are focused on, talking about all the noise that is being created as a distraction. Like, for example, like what Trump is doing with immigration, like ICE agents, or like just the fact that he's making immigration so much harder for everyone. It is getting much harder, I agree. There's a lot of chaos. It's a very tough situation for anyone who might be an immigrant in the US right now. But At the same time, I feel like the theatrics are maybe about 10 times the actual problem. Same thing happened with Trump's tariffs. Like, yes, he did implement some tariffs, but people started yelling and screaming about tariffs so much more than what the actual tariffs were. Like, if you look at the fine print, if you look at what actually happened, yes, it was bad, but his party is so good at shouting. Like, the Republicans right now are so good at shouting and almost fueling that outrage because they want people to keep talking about them. They're so good at yelling about a particular radical thing that they've implemented, even if that thing might not be proportionate to the scope of the yelling. It not to say that thing was not a problem or not a big deal at all, but it was a big deal. But these people like inflate
Hmm.
it to this level where it becomes more of a shouting match than actually a discussion that concerns the topic. And on this background, people are so busy like yelling back and forth about these issues, which are not trivial, but they're also not as massive, like proportionate to the discourse that's happening. And then these types of things, which is like people are literally not going to get fed if the government stays shut down. They're just like slipping through the cracks and no one's actually talking about them until after they've happened. If that's kind of how I
Hmm.
that's kind of how I see it. Now, again, I could be very wrong on many fronts, but
Hmm. Hmm.
I do think
And
that that's what's going on.
just to add to this, I think it's above specific parties and specific ways of controlling public opinion. I think it's also inherent to the nature of the technology, social
Okay.
media in this regard, and clickbait in general, because journalism nowadays is really clickbait. Like there is a headline which says something completely different than what is actually in the body of the article. And if all you do is retweeting headlines, then you have a
Yeah,
very different understanding of the world than if
agreed.
you
Yeah.
were reading the articles. What happens now is that we have clickbait and we have rage bait, and we also have a certain pace of change. So the space time of politics in that regard, which is
Yeah.
so fast that we cannot actually process anything. So um, a, you want to start a discussion about something? Well, guess what? There are 10 other things that came up this morning.
Oh,
So you are already, yeah, you are already outdated.
yeah. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
I dropped.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. So you are already out of sync,
Yeah.
and you are out of sync. Therefore, the discussion isn't going anywhere because we have to talk about
Mhm.
this new topic. And that's a little bit that I also saw when I was working in politics, where you have a frenetic pace of change. Even
Okay.
back
Yeah.
then, when social media wasn't as entrenched as it is nowadays,
Mhm.
where effectively you work all day long, like 24/7. Like you don't have actually free time because
'Cause you have to keep staying updated. Yeah. Mhm.
yes. So somebody will tweet something at midnight, let's say in America. So in our case, it's a time where we are normally asleep. And then you're
Mhm.
like, well, you have to know what they actually said because it has implications for us.
Yeah.
So that also makes it so that people are jaded.
I
And
agree.
even the people who are making decisions ultimately are operating with far less imperfect information that they would otherwise be operating with.
Yeah.
So that also has the effect of bringing down the quality of public discourse in general. And
Mhm.
it is a cross party and cross country, I would say.
And another thing I like to say is like kind of tying back into what you just said, like with social media and with like just how many variables there are in the picture. It's like I almost feel like kind of in contrast to what I said earlier, like talking about politics is important, but smart people are checking out and that's a problem. Now, I also think that on the other hand, I can't fully blame them just because I would say staying informed on like what's going on in the world has almost become like a full-time job. Like you just
Hmm.
said, it's it's not as easy as just like wake up in the morning and like while you're drinking your coffee or whatever, turn on the news. It's not that easy anymore because what the news says is biased. The what the newspaper says is biased. What the tweets say obviously is biased. There will be 20 sources of journalism that you can look at to
Hmm.
read about the same thing, and they're all going to be biased with their own specific, you know, ideology that they're trying to push. And I guess there are, like, workarounds. You could try, like, Ground News or any of those, like, apps that kind of, like, try to, like, show you one thing from each side or whatever. But I can how do you as a person even know that that can be trusted? You know, like, how do you know that they're not trying to also push an agenda? Like,
Hmm.
it's or one thing that I do, like, personally, I like to read Reuters because it's international. It doesn't try to bias. Like, they'll just report what happened. They won't really report, like, opinion pieces on the internal affairs of any country. But pretty much like these are also things that these are judgments that you have to make by yourself. Like, okay, I think Reuters is good enough. Not that it's good. I think that Reuters is good enough. I think Ground News is good enough. Whatever you choose to look at. But there's just become like so much trash kind of like in that pipeline, so much noise in the system of journalism that to look for a specific thing that you want to like read about an objective quote unquote objective read on a particular situation is just so hard. Like first you have to find what's objective and then you have to read it. And I feel like it would actually take you all day if you were trying to do that with all issues all the time. And people are just like it's not worth it anymore, which honestly like I don't blame them. But I think that more than anything, this is why people need to be getting together and talking about things. Like, people need to be making these topics a part of their daily discourse with their friends, with their family, with anyone that they might be around, because that way, like, maybe you'll read your own little biased source of news, but hopefully, by talking to everyone else around you who might be reading theirs, you'll come to like maybe a situation where you can see all sides. And of course, this isn't sustainable to do every day, but I feel like trying to, like, move away from this, saying, like, "This is all beneath me, I'm not interested," is very counterproductive. That's
Yes, yes, yes. And two things. One is the sheer volume of information. Of course, it boggles the mind. You cannot keep up with
Mm.
it. That's the first thing. So you need the division of labor in that regard.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is that in a group that is open to discourse, common sense tends to prevail, but they have to be open to discussion. If they are just antagonistic and they just
Mhm.
say, "Oh no, we are shouting louder than you, therefore this is the truth," then of
Yeah,
course
exactly.
it's the opposite effect. Is groups become less and less reasonable. But
Yeah.
otherwise, if they are willing to talk, it's common sense, and common sense will work.
I do agree that, like and that's another thing, like, again, I have so many opinions on this, but, like, that's another thing. I feel like it's almost like every opinion I have is like a node in a circular chain diagram where it's, like, kinda going like this. But I think that another thing that on the one hand, yeah, there's, like, a lot of tribal discourse and shouting and yelling and stuff like that. On the other, I feel like there's started to be this notion in political discourse or pretty much any discourse really that you need to make people feel safe by not offending them.
Mm.
And when you say not offending them, you mean not disagreeing with them at all. So, like, a lot of times sensitive topics, topics that might trigger someone are just like kept out of all conversation ever. And it's considered socially, it's considered that you're emotionally intelligent or socially savvy if you do that. If you just completely avoid any discussion of religion, any discussion of politics, any discussion of like your identity in whatever way, it's considered good. And the reason it's considered good is because people, I think, more and more are being sold this idea that you have to be comfortable at all times and not have to deal with disagreement or conflict ever. And I really don't like that because I think that like first of all, you get closer to your friends, to your family, to the people around you by having disagreements and working through them. You don't get closer to them by just sanitizing everything and making sure that all the topics stay safe. I think that it's become uncool, and it's not just become uncool, it's also become offensive or it's like you're too much socially if you bring up these topics at all. And the public discourse I think is reinforcing that idea. Like the idea that oh, this is a safe space for, X group of people. And that usually means we don't attack that ideology at all. Like, even if it's just an intellectual disagreement, even if we're not saying you're wrong for living your life a certain way, even if you're not saying that, you're just not allowed to disagree. And I think that that's really like harmful, and it's gonna only lead to these tribal groups forming even more. Um,
Because what happens is that you have an expanded conception of identity,
exactly.
where it's like what defines me now is more than what would otherwise define me. And
Mhm.
once you include preferences as your identity and specific opinions, ultimately you reach a point where you cannot actually argue about anything because somebody will be offended somewhere.
Yeah.
There is also this, like in everyday talk, they say, "Oh, I don't mean to criticize, but what do you think about
Yeah.
such and such?" And criticism has acquired this negative connotation where it's like, if I am saying something that you don't agree with or you are not doing, therefore I am being a polemicist, I am attacking you.
Yeah.
Whereas
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think criticism is the hallmark of a good discussion. It's like how you are able to grow as a person. And this goes back to, for example, the dialectical method of Socrates.
Hmm.
What Socrates is basically doing is asking, well, why do you believe what you believe? Can we actually check? So, in effect, Socrates is criticizing and is saying, have you actually considered what you are saying, or it's just vibes? Basically,
Yeah.
that's what Socrates is saying. And
Does the
through
system
the
uphold questioning?
Yes, yes, exactly. And through that process, you get to become better as a person because now you get to understand the parts of your thinking that are well grounded in fact or research and
Hmm.
the parts that are wishful and you think you know, but you actually don't. And you are
Yeah.
defensive about because subconsciously you don't want them to be exposed as empty words, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree with that. I think
Th-
that that's. Sorry, go on.
No, 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 please, please, please.
No, I think that that's like a. I think that that's important, and like I was saying before, it's important to like question each other. It's important to disagree with each other, and it's important to like see each other's side without being offended. And yes, you should be respectful. You shouldn't attack someone saying, "Oh, I just don't approve of your lifestyle. I wish you would change." That's not what you do. But you, at the same time, I think it's completely valid to say, while you may live a certain way or you may choose to like think a certain way, I don't think that way. And I think you should hear me out and I will hear you out. I think that should be part of, everyday discourse. Like, if you look at not just like people's conversations, but also look at media, not just like conversational norms, but also like what is being showed to people. Have you noticed that these days everything is very sanitized, very, you don't touch offensive topics. Like, you don't have anything in there that might, offend anyone in your population. And again, this ties back into the fact that like all of this stuff is just going to like this bigger capitalist system now. They're trying to like maximize their audience as much as possible in all forms of media, really. And they see that the easiest way to do that is to not offend a single person. They want to make sure that everyone, as many people as they can get to pay for their thing, they will get to pay for their thing.
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
which is another part of like another point that I always like to make is that people who are talking about identity politics, they like, you'll look at people who are criticizing identity politics. They're criticizing this idea that like your race, your gender, your sexual identity, your, any identity that you choose to like latch onto is stupid. Like, there's people who are like, don't do that. Like, that is not, and I kind of agree. I think that like it's not important. But there's people who are very very attached to their identity based off of these things. And that's where identity politics comes from. It's like, I identify with this race or this gender or this way of thinking. And anyone who disagrees with me is attacking me. Then, on the other hand, there are people who are, so there's people who are criticizing that. And have you noticed that those are the same people usually, like the right wing in this in like the US, anti woke people who are against identity politics. They're the same people who are supporting corporate they're supporting corporate monopolies, they're supporting capitalism, they're anti like labor regulation or anti like market regulation or anything like that. And they're kind of feeding each other. I feel like this whole identity politics woke kind of culture is more of a corporate thing than it's a political thing. It's not really a like there's no law saying like woke people rule. There's nothing like that. There is just nothing there. It's not a thing. I feel like the right creates that as a scapegoat to fight against. And even though it's not really the left, it's not really something that people on the left are doing politically. It may be as a talking point, but definitely not as far as policy goes, beyond like to a certain degree. And what's happening as a result? The corporations, the same corporations that are the donors for the right, are getting to capitalize on how look how inclusive we are. Look how we look at all perspectives. Look at how we treat everyone equally, and they make money off of it. In the end of the day, it's just a way for them to make money.
Hmm.
And I feel like this whole like woke and anti woke thing that's become like such a big talking point in the U.S. And it's kind of becoming like one of the base things on which like all political discourse is kind of built, is just a non-issue. It's literally a self-feeding loop. The people who are criticizing it are actually enabling it, and the people who are enabling it are, you know, they want the criticism because then their side can keep winning, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. It's also a way of not discussing anything of substance beyond identities, because fundamentally the
Yes,
way it is
yes.
framed
Mhm,
is, well, either you agree or you disagree. But what will happen in practice in terms of political realities that will be created after the government does certain things, any government, is
mhm,
that you will be oscillating from one to the other.
exactly.
And what happens is you have people who are divided along those lines. I think what part of the problem here is that it is an easy win. So it was fashionable a few years ago to have this sanitized approach where nobody
Mhm.
touches anything and that sort of thing. But once that becomes démodé, so once it goes out of fashion, you have the opposite, which is let's be provocatorial. Let's just
Mhm.
provocative rather. Let's just be provocative and let's just be edgy. And we
Yeah.
go to the other
I
end.
was I definitely was in that phase, like, I would trigger people online just for fun. That I had a phase. Mhm.
So what effectively happens is ups and downs that are fashions.
Yeah,
So you will go through, I don't know, 5, 10 years of the reaction and then the action, and it will go back and forth like this without actually discussing anything else beyond that. And
I
in that
agree.
regard, it is a distraction because
It's
there
yeah,
are, like, however you identify, there are still material realities,
mhm,
and these material realities will not change because the argument on identities is leaning one way or the other. And
exactly.
just to say, this is of course more of an Americanism,
That's
but
fair.
we have that elsewhere. We have that in Europe in different ways, where we have the identity politics in terms of ethnicity, in terms
Mhm,
of us against immigrants,
mhm.
and the anti-immigrant position, I think, is fundamentally not saying the whole truth. Like, you can say, for example, I am against migration. So that's an opinion. Fair enough. Let's discuss it. What are the pros and cons?
Mhm.
But you cannot just stay there, because if you think again programmatically, you have to consider what are the implications for the social system. Like, if we don't have people doing jobs, who will contribute to the social security funds?
Yeah,
Who
exactly.
will be doing the jobs that locals do not want to do, like construction work, for example, or
Mhm.
agriculture? Who will be doing that if it's not the foreigners, if it's not the migrants? So it's very easy to win points which are tokenistic. But
That's a
again,
good
we
word.
come
That's a
back
great
to
word.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, tokenistic. And we go back to this point of, well, what is the programmatic view of this policy, any policy? So pro migration or anti migration, like Have you thought it through? If you were tomorrow to implement it, have you thought about all the ramifications, or are you
I mean,
just going with
yeah.
the vibes?
The answer is obviously no, right? Because it's not a black and white stance. Pro-migration, let them all in. Anti-migration, close all the borders. It's not like that.
Exactly.
But again, like the current like political discourse or like the fashionable political discourse, like you said, rewards people who are thinking in black and white without any nuance. Um, so yeah, it's like it's very refreshing to have a conversation like this with someone who kind of like sees things similarly, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I might have gotten like a little bit rambly and lost people along the way, but like the but I mean, it's very interesting to see that like that this perspective that I have is not like impossible to discuss, I guess.
No, no, it's not impossible. There is another thing to it, which is the kind of person you are, because of course there are the arguments, and then there is the how you carry yourself, like your body
Yeah.
language, your conduct, like what kind of person you are.
Mhm.
And if you are going with the memes, so if you want to only get cheap, easy wins, what
Mhm.
happens is that in practice you are a swindler. In
That's fair.
practice, you are just there to manipulate people. Like you
Mhm.
don't have integrity. Fundamentally, that's what it is.
Yeah,
So if you don't have integrity and you are a leading figure, what happens is that others will likely do the same. So it creates this effect where it's a race to the bottom.
that's fair. Yeah. So here's
And
another.
yeah,
Sorry, go
sorry.
on.
No, no, go
No,
ahead.
no, no, go on. Mhm.
So basically, the idea is, and this makes it so that the ground for the next series of discussion is already primed to start from a position of disrespect in that regard at the
Mhm.
interpersonal level, notwithstanding the substantive points, regardless of them. So
Mhm.
if you are just treating people as a means to an end, then
Mhm.
it means that you don't respect them, and you start with that.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean like I guess like here's a question that I had like kind of building on what you just what you just talked about. So when you look at a public figure, like not just a politician, but maybe just someone who when they talk people will listen. Someone who's famous enough, someone who's considered respectable enough by like a good number of people in the population. Do you think that they have a certain responsibility to maybe not exactly filter what they say, but to maybe think things through a little bit more before they make a statement, because that is what the people are seeing and that's what the people are like using almost to form their own opinions off of. Would you say that that's something that public figures, that's a responsibility that public figures have, or would you say it's more of just like they're human just like anyone else, they should say what they want and people should be able to like know that not everything that comes out of anyone's mouth should be trusted? um
Hmm. Hmm.
so yeah, what's your on that?
You can understand the dynamic here if you think about the parent and the child dynamic.
Mhm,
Like what the parent does, not what the parent says. What the parent does is what the child will follow.
mhm,
So if the parent says, "Oh, don't do this; it's terrible for you," but the parent does it, chances are the child will do the same.
yeah, mhm.
Because it's like, well, you don't stand by your word. You don't actually believe in those. One second, my dogs are making a lot of noise. I don't know if you can hear them in the audio.
I can, but it's not too loud. I can hear you just fine. Yeah, mhm.
Okay, okay. So then the point is that the same dynamic applies when you are an influencer figure. So when you are somebody who
Okay.
others look up to and want to hear their opinion of their take on the matter,
Mhm.
you are a tutelary figure. You are a little bit like a parent.
Okay.
So you have more responsibility because of the consequences of your words. Like somebody who is influential can say one word which has far reaching implications. It can
Mhm.
create consequences. Whereas
Yeah,
somebody who is a nobody in that regard, not influential, their word lives and dies where they are. It doesn't
yeah,
go anywhere.
mhm.
So the person who is more influential ultimately has to lead by example. And
I okay,
and
that makes
you
sense.
see that you see that in families. You also see it in groups of people. Like if you are in a, because you mentioned earlier about the work and how they want you to
Yeah.
be a good team player,
Mhm.
like in a team, in a group dynamic, if your higher up is fooling around, ultimately you have the incentive to do the same. And I have seen that
Exactly.
in many jobs that I have done.
Mhm.
So I have done a lot of jobs, not just bartending that I mentioned earlier, lots of different kinds of jobs. And you see that everywhere because it's the same dynamic with people. People are the same everywhere.
Yeah,
And once you understand that, then you work with that. And you have to think from the interpersonal relations, then you have to think into the political relation.
that's fair, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Mm. So, I guess, like, again, like, not to, like, completely like, to push back a little on what you said, would you say that maybe, like, in the process of treating these public figures or, like, influencers as the parent kind of in the dynamic, wouldn't you say that on the flip side, that's also kind of treating the average person like a child? Wouldn't you say that's also, like, kind of almost assuming stupidity from the majority of the population? Um, which again, like, what's your thought? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that, like, when a politician or a public figure is making a statement, they should be making that statement almost with the assumption that your audience is not at all intelligent? Or should you be making that statement assuming some prerequisite knowledge or some critical thinking from the people that you're targeting? Because I feel like it's becoming more and more so, at least in American politics, I would say it's becoming more and more that it's just becoming about, like, who can shout the loudest and who can, like, reach the most people the quickest. What would you say is a good balance between, like, um, upholding responsibility from the public figure's end to say something that won't misinform the public or won't mislead the public, and also just like knowing that the public is not that stupid? Like, what would you say is like the correct balance between the two?
So first of all, the familial metaphor is a metaphor. It doesn't mean that it's a
Oh
one
yeah,
to
yeah.
one. So,
Mhm.
so I'm not saying that. Therefore, you should be infantilizing people. First of
Yeah,
all, that wouldn't work. Secondly,
yeah,
even in a parent-child relationship, ultimately that doesn't work for too long. Maybe when the kids are very small, then maybe it works. But
yeah.
the
Mhm.
child ultimately is a small human. It's not stupid because it's young.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's not like that. So effectively, you have to treat it as a small human, like a young person.
Mhm.
So there is that. But it's mostly a dynamic between the tutelary figures and those who are being tutored.
Yeah,
So or those who follow or who get influenced or who listen. It doesn't mean that they are drones. They are just mindlessly following instructions.
yeah, yeah,
It means that they are at the receiving end of some communication you are putting out. So there
yeah.
is that dynamic. They are
Mhm.
recipients. And as recipients, of course, they can think for themselves, and that's good.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying here is, in terms of your quality as a person,
Mhm.
regardless of what you are saying, like you
Yeah,
have to communicate a certain kind of personality which shows responsibility. Like you understand that you hold power. There is this saying,
yeah.
like when you launch the Unix terminal for the first time and you want to do sudo, it says, well, with great power comes great responsibility. Are you sure?
Mhm.
And basically, it's that. Like, understand that if you are in a position of power, you don't just have power, you also have responsibility. And if you
Yeah,
decouple the two, then what happens is you have egregious power
that's fair.
and power that will become ever more hostile to others,
That
abusive.
makes sense, yeah. That's actually a really good point. Yeah, because so here's I guess, like, just again, this is more of just me trying to ask like a question that I had in mind for a while. Um, but you started writing, right, on your blog. So completely pivoting from politics or anything that we were discussing. Um, you have like a lot of different sections. You have like an inspirational kind of section where you talk about like lifestyle. You have like a section where you talk about politics for one. You have a section where you write poetry even. And then you have a section where you like post pictures of yourself. You have like yeah, you have a lot of sections in your blog. So I guess like a question I have is um what was the thought process behind, like, wanting to write about each particular thing, or like wanting to say, this is when I felt like I should write about this, or this is when I felt like I should write about that. It's a very broad question, so feel free to like make it
Hmm.
use the scope as you see fit. But yeah, I wanted to just generally ask about your blog and your writing.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of anticipated in what I said earlier about keeping yourself fresh by being mindful of your feelings. Like, how do I feel about it? For
Hmm.
example, I am blogging about the European Union, and I'm doing that for a while. How do
Yeah.
I feel about it? Do I want to keep doing it, or do I want to take a step back and experiment with something else and try new things? So it's basically that. It's a way for me to reinvent myself and to keep myself fresh and to ultimately broaden my horizons. Because, and this is something I see, for example, I have mentioned this concept of programmatic policy making, right?
Hmm.
That's something that is informed by my exposure to programming,
That's fair. Yeah. Hmm.
where in programming, you don't just do vibes. It's like, well, I want something, but ultimately there has to be an implementation of it.
Unless you're vibe coding. I'm kidding. I'm
But
kidding.
but even there, of course, yeah, I know what they are saying. Uh, Somebody is implementing it, so maybe you don't know, but yeah, the point is that you cannot just express a want or an opinion. Like there has to be step A, step B, etc., which culminates in some product.
Yeah.
And also, when you start thinking in terms of programs, you understand how one thing leads to the other. Like the return value of one function can go into
Yeah.
another function, kind of thing, right? And there is a certain state of
Hmm.
that you are dealing with of your program, and so on. This is helpful when you do politics. It's helpful when you think in terms of politics because now you have a more practical way of going about it. It's not just this is how I feel about it, and it would be good if it were to
Hmm.
happen.
Yeah. Hmm.
Other sections, such as the lifestyle section or the commentary, as it is called, um,
Yeah.
came about not by personal initiative, but organically, where people would send me questions.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, I will respond in full, which is what I always do. I always respond to all the correspondence I receive.
Yeah.
And I will respond in full. I won't leave you hanging. It's not like a yes or no. I will
Hmm.
respond in full, but then I'm like, hey, others may have the same question. How about I publish it? And of
Yeah.
course, keep away the private details. So not sharing the person's name or contact
Yeah. Yeah.
details.
Yeah.
So, like that, it came about that I have a lot of publications along those lines, general
Mhm.
life issues. And
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting that this happened without me forcing it to happen.
That makes sense. So did you just start getting people who started writing to you by reading like your blog, and then you decide to like start addressing their points like one at a time?
Hmm. Hmm. So they
Oh, nice.
will write me. There are many such publications where somebody will ask me a few things like, for example, you mentioned AI. Hey, AI, what is the impact of AI on authenticity and art? And I am feeling depressed about it, that sort of thing. And then I provide my opinion
Actually, yeah,
on.
what are your thoughts on that? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
mhm,
It goes back to what you were discussing about parents not forcing their children to go a certain way in terms of hobbies,
yeah.
meaning doing something because you like it fundamentally. It comes from within.
Mhm.
And my idea is that if you do something you like, in this case, art, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter whether the rest of the world does art through an LLM or there is a machine
Yeah.
that does it
Mhm.
because you still enjoy the process.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
for
I would
example,
say I
now
agree.
you are drawing a sketch and fundamentally you do that.
It's coming. Mhm.
Wow. That looks elaborate. That's very nice.
Mhm.
um, you are doing that because ultimately it's something that expresses a side of you, a part of you. It comes from within. It's something you like to do. It's something
Yeah,
that fulfills you. It's something that has the recreational effect, to go back to that word I
exactly.
mentioned
Yeah.
earlier.
Mhm.
So no future can take that away from you. Like
I
no
agree.
future, I mean technological development in that regard. And no person. It's something you enjoy, you like it, and it ends there. Um, and then I basically say also that art has always been standardized slash streamlined. It's not a new phenomenon. It's not AI that does this. It has been happening since antiquity. For
Mm-hmm.
example, this Greek, the pottery, the Greek pottery,
Yeah,
where they have
yeah.
all those paintings on them. So, um, at one level, you can think of this as art. At another level, you can think of it as branding. Because imagine in the
Yeah.
old days, people are doing trade, and the Greeks, for example, will share something with the rest of the world, which is, I don't know, wine or olive oil or something that they produce locally, and they
Mm-hmm.
will take it to a country far away. Let's say they will take it to Egypt, or they will take it to Georgia, where the Caucasus Mountains are.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you say "made in Greece"? What a better way than to have those
Yeah,
figures where it's like all the gods and the heroes and stuff. So it's a streamlined art, it's branding, it's marketing, it's, if you want, a tourist trap. And it has been happening since antiquity. Not to say that this is the
and AI
exception, by the
can't
way.
do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, where I live in Cyprus, it's
Mm-hmm.
called the island of Aphrodite. So
Yeah.
Aphrodite is an ancient goddess, the
Goddess.
goddess of love, etc. It's not that people actually believe this, but it's a good branding. It's a good marketing. Like, come here, it's the island of Aphrodite, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you
it
have like
sells
a
well.
statue of Aphrodite on it?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
makes for good business ultimately. And this has been happening, and it doesn't deter your, as an individual, your artistic side. If it comes from within, it will come regardless.
I agree. Yes. That is so yeah, I guess and that goes back to like what you were saying earlier. It's like you're doing it for the fact that you like it and it's not for productivity. You're not trying to optimize the result. It's more about just the fact that you're doing something that you enjoy and you're doing it because you enjoy it, not because you want to produce something that you can show off about. And I think that AI is only going to like make the result, as you can say, it's not going to like look as impressive maybe because it's like an AI can do it too. But if you enjoy doing the thing, if you enjoy the process, it's not really about the product. It's not really about the result. It's about like the fact that you enjoy art or that you enjoy music or whatever it is that you enjoy. Um and the fact that you're doing it because you like it, not because you want to like say, look, I did this, look how productive I was, or look how yeah. Um so I do agree with you. So I would say that like if you had to summarize, I guess would you say that your stance is generally like pro AI, like you're looking to um
It's a
you're interested in
nuanced.
the
It's
field.
nuanced, I would say,
It's nuanced. Okay, that's fair.
in the sense that technological progress is inexorable. Like, you won't stop it.
Yeah.
And every single progress, every single step has good things and bad things. This is,
Mhm.
again, ancient. Like,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
there is this myth, the ancient Greek myth of Prometheus, we
Mhm.
say in Greek. And what Prometheus is basically about is somebody who grants people, who bestows upon them the art, the know-how of how to use fire. And of
Yeah.
course, once you know how to use fire, you can cook, you can warm up your house, heat the place,
Mhm.
so it's nice and comfortable for the family. But you can also burn a place down, so you can also use it for war. So
Yeah.
since the very beginning, we have technology, in this case fire, which is both good and bad.
Mhm.
And if you say, oh, we don't want fire because we can use it as a weapon, then you won't have fire for all the good things it gives you, like cooked
Yeah.
meals
Mhm.
or warmth. So you
Yeah.
cannot have one without the other. That is the idea. And this is true for every technology. And it's why ultimately you cannot be technophobic or anti technology, because there are good things in it. There are problems, of course. But for example, with the AI, many of the problems that are attributed to AI or LLMs in this
Your
case.
problems with people. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Mhm.
for example, if I want to impress somebody that I am a painter, right? I can draw stuff, I can sketch, and
Mhm.
I seek validation, right? I'm like, hey, look at me, I drew this right now.
Mhm.
And it's the product of a prompt, of a LLM prompt. What
Yeah.
happens is that I cannot back that up. So I am a fraud in time one, But now I have to be a fraud in perpetuity
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise my charade will be exposed. So now, instead of empowering myself to have a good relationship, a good dynamic with this person I'm trying to impress, I am acting insecurely.
Yeah.
So that's not the AI that did it. That's you trying to defraud somebody, effectively.
I agree. I fully agree. And I think that that's definitely something that you need to like think about when you're doing when you're like making an argument about AI. You need to think, is AI really the thing that you're attacking here, or are you just attacking, oh, this makes it easier for people to do this? And and yeah, that's been the case with like every technology that's kind of come into being since the beginning of time, really. Like, yes, it's going to enable people to do things that maybe they shouldn't be doing, but is that really because of the technology, or is it because of, people just being, hostile sometimes, or people just being insecure, feeling inadequate, wanting validation, whatever it is that is generally, you know, considered a problem with human behavior.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
And
So,
just to add to this, just to add a little bit to this.
mhm,
So, what is considered a problem? I think it ultimately is benign in the grand scheme of things because it's a little bit like if your code has a security vulnerability. Now you have to
yeah.
improve your code.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit like that. You have something out there that people can abuse, and they will abuse, of course, if they
Yeah.
can. And now you are tasked to actually improve it, make it more robust. And
Hmm.
that engenders a new innovation. And of
Exactly.
course, the cycle repeats itself
Yeah.
for the better and the worse.
So yeah, I actually think that like what you're saying, like security vulnerability is a big thing that AI is going to cause. Like the more people start to like code with AI, that is one thing that the AI is not going to do, because like there's so much code that it like people's random GitHub repos or however like AIs have been trained to code. LLMs are not going to consider those things. LLMs just don't see why they need to account for those things. I think
Hmm.
unsafe code is one of the biggest issues with what an LLM would produce. And would that require, like, would LLMs existing maybe change how coding jobs look? It'll probably change just like what the day-to-day work of a software engineer is. It might move a little bit more towards vibe coding, and might move a little bit away from sit down and write every line yourself. But there are other things like security, for example, which are going to become something where you need a person, because LMs are not going to optimize for that. Their training sets are just not good enough, kind of on that front, to do that. I think that along with the negatives, like there's a lot of fear mongering about AI going on, where people are like, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your individualism, you're going to lose your like ability to do this thing that made you a unique compared to other people, because now an AI can do it. There's just so much stuff like that going out there about AI. I feel like there isn't enough discourse like at all about, look at the bright side. Like look at what this whole world of innovation that's still waiting to happen, because AI is now enabling the grunt work kind of to
Hmm.
be removed from the system, from the process. And I think that so many people, so many intelligent engineers or programmers or people who are in those industries are being a little too pessimistic about what AI is gonna do, I think.
Hmm.
Mm,
Hmm. Which is understandable, of course. And this goes to a general point about people and their behavior.
yeah,
We don't just have a rational side. It's not like, oh, I will perform a cost benefit calculation and come to a
yeah,
reasonable conclusion. We also have an emotional side. And if you
mhm,
see that, for example, your job is in danger and things are happening and you cannot keep up, then of
mhm,
course you have a different outlook than if you are thinking from a position of security. That
yeah,
alone, like the precarious standing, ultimately will condition your thinking, other things being equal.
exactly.
So, of course, people might be more pessimistic or optimistic depending on their material conditions and expected material conditions in the
Mhm,
near term. So, there is
yeah,
that. The other thing is that you have to think of every technology, but I would say rather every topic, not in static terms, it is dynamic.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you may say, okay, but LLMs cannot actually solve security vulnerabilities. Well,
Not
but
yet, but anyway.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, not yet. Well,
Mhm.
we cannot have that as a foregone conclusion and just be complacent about it. There may
Yeah.
be a future not too far from here where things are happening and you can actually rely on AI to do that. Or
Hmm.
maybe people, by using it more, they get better at using it. Like at the
Yeah.
beginning, we
Exactly.
are exuberant, we are overexcited about it, and we just play around and we think it is the panacea, like
Hmm.
the cure for everything.
Yep.
But eventually, we are more sober and we have a more grounded understanding of what it actually does. And then we are like,
Hmm.
okay, this is a good use for it. And then we start using it better. That
Yeah.
can also happen.
So here's a question. You just mentioned like people have an emotional side as well as just a rational side. So I'm definitely a person who has a lot of trouble tapping into my emotional side. I definitely try to apply engineering logic or like programming logic, that kind of thing, to everything that I do. And it's kind of been a problem, especially because I like music, I like singing, and there's like emotional components to stuff like that that you can't analyze your way out of. You have to be able to actually like get in that mindset and feel it out. Um, would you say that like I'm just getting the impression from like interacting with you that maybe you've also struggled with something similar throughout life? And how would you say that like writing about more emotional topics like your poetry and stuff has helped you come out of that a little bit, or maybe even yeah,
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
just your process of getting out of
It's basically to accept the fact that you are multifaceted. So of course we have a rational side, and many times it is the dominant side,
it?
but we don't have just that. And we, if we pretend that this is all we do, then that will be detrimental to our state of mind. And
Yeah.
I think people who are extra logical in that regard, like because of course there is a different distribution of competencies, people who are more on the side of being rational than being emotional, I think
Hmm.
those people are more prone to it. Speaking for myself, for example, where it's like,
Yeah.
well, my default mode of working is to put things down to something that is logical and think them through.
Yeah.
But what happens is you have to understand that this is not your only side. So you have to
Yeah.
accept that there are times in life where you need a different tiebreaker because thinking things through ultimately doesn't lead to an outcome.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
it's the gut feeling, as we say, like, okay, at the end of the day, how do you feel about it?
Hmm.
And there is something to be said here about faith. Faith is a term that has been appropriated, if you will, to mean something very specific, like, oh, I have faith in
Religion.
one
Yeah.
specific kind of God, yes. But what
Hmm.
I mean here is faith in the sense that I don't know the outcome ahead of time.
Oh,
So
just believe in yourself.
if I commit to a course of action,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I commit to do this meeting with you. I have
Hmm.
faith in the fact that electricity will not fail me, for
Hmm.
example, as simple as that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So once you start thinking about faith in those terms, you understand that we are always operating within imperfect circumstances. Our information is not complete. So
Mhm.
even when we are really rational, ultimately there is a gap there. And that gap is filled by faith, what I call now
That's
faith
that's
here.
very that makes a lot of sense. And how does that tie into, like, the poetry that you do or, like, the, emotional parts of your writing that
Hmm.
are, like, in your
It's a way, let me take a step back here. Writing in general is a way to show who you are because you cannot hide ultimately.
Mhm.
Like through writing, you show how you think things, how you approach things. You show what your current level of writing skills are, what your command of the language is. So you
Yeah,
show all that. Basically, you are transparent. You cannot fake it.
yeah,
Of course, like you can actually, but I mean, if you are not trying to fake it, ultimately your real self comes through.
yeah,
And if you have that, then poetry, in this specific example, is a way of accepting that side of you. In my case, me, it's a way of saying, "Look, this is how I feel about things in the current moment, in present
yeah,
time. This expresses me." So
mhm.
it captures a certain feeling, a state of mind, and in so doing, it is true.
Yeah,
It is
okay.
true, not in a factual, in terms of the objective reality, as it were, but it is true in the sense of this is how I feel right now
Mhm.
with the specific words that came to mind.
Yeah, that makes
So it's
sense.
the truth of the moment. And if I were to retry, maybe I would do something different.
Okay, that makes sense. And would you say you use music maybe? I know you're not like necessarily you don't play an instrument or you're not necessarily someone who makes music, but would you say that it maybe in just like the process of listening to music or analyzing music, would you say that you approach that a similar way? Because I don't necessarily relate to poetry. I'm not a poet. I don't write
Hmm.
poetry.
Hmm.
I would like to try. I've never done it before, but I would like to try. I definitely approach what you just described through music a little bit more than through poetry. So would you
Hmm.
say that you approach music the same way?
Music as well, yes. And what I committed to doing recently is um, not listen to music passively. So I used to have
That's
music playing on
interesting.
the background.
Mhm.
So what's it called? Like a musical carpet, I think is the expression.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Wallpaper.
basically, yeah, it's always there.
Mhm.
And I stopped doing that because I'm like, what am I actually doing here? Am I listening? Am I paying attention or not? I'm doing something else. And this is just for it to stimulate my brain. So I will try without that stimulus. That was my idea.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
then, combined with that, I will now listen to music purposefully. So
Yeah,
I will
deep
be like, you
listening.
know what? I will just listen and pay attention. And actually, there are many Greek songs that I was well aware of for years, but I never knew the lyrics of. Like, even if it's in
Oh,
Greek,
yeah.
like, it's terrible. So I committed to this interpretations section that I have on my website, where I'm like, you know what? I will write about a song that I enjoy. I will take the lyrics, translate them, and then say something about them. But in the
Mhm.
process, I have conditioned myself to actually listen and pay attention.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a rewarding experience. It's basically an upgrade in mindfulness, if that makes sense, because
Yeah,
it's
that makes a
like
lot of sense.
it's
Mhm.
like I am now in control of my experience, and I operate from a position of initiative.
Yeah. So one article that I read on your blog, again, it's not about the music, I haven't read everything, I've read some of them, was the Big 5 test that you did.
Ah,
Um
yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, like, I did that pretty recently too, and I actually, like, was looking through your articles just yesterday, and that was one of the ones that stood out to me. I also did that pretty recently. Now, I don't remember exactly what I got on everything, but, would you say that, like, stuff like that maybe like, taking away from, like, just what you scored and discussing that, I just mean, like, would you say that stuff like that helps you as well in, like, knowing yourself better and like knowing how to approach maybe a certain type of feeling that you're doing when you're writing poetry or writing a blog, or would you say that that stuff just seems like kind of pointless to you?
It depends on at which point in your life will you be exposed to them. Like they have this thing with the
Okay.
IQ test, for example, where they take all the kids through the test.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately creates like a caste system, as it were, where it's like,
Yeah,
oh, you don't
IQ tests are
belong.
not because
Yeah.
IQ tests I don't like because I mean those are more like they give you a number, whereas something like a personality test will tell you like, oh, this is how you are. It's a little
Hmm.
bit more
Hmm.
descriptive.
But what I'm saying is like, if you are exposed to that relatively early in life,
Hmm.
um, you are at the point where you are still being formed. So you are at the point where your character hasn't calcified. It's in a state of flux.
Yeah. Hmm.
And even if there are certain qualities that are there dominant, we
Hmm.
don't know exactly how it will be, notwithstanding the fact that people will try to adapt to their environment.
Exactly.
So you have that effect of the chameleon. So you try to blend
Mhm.
in.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I think doing it very early in life doesn't help in that regard.
Hmm.
Or if you do it, you have to have the proviso with it, the asterisk, which says, well, this is not definitive. I just take it at face value and then I remain open minded. I might not be exactly this. A future test may reveal something else.
Yeah, that's fair.
And
Um,
just to say this, for example, I am an introverted person on the introversion side, and I think that's very clear about me. But
Yeah. Mhm.
both when
Some
I
to some
was
people.
a teenager and later in life, all the jobs I was doing, all the activities I was doing were that of an extroverted person. So, for example, it's very common for introverted people to be doing mostly activities at home or with the computer and such. Me, I
Yeah,
was doing
sports
social
too.
activities like sport,
Mhm.
for example. And I was, in a sense, always gregarious. I was always with people. And because I was involved in different activities, like, so I was doing sport, but I was also working as an apprentice to a motorcycle mechanic. So I also had a motorcycle and I had my
Oh, wow.
motorian friends as
That's really
well.
cool.
And so I would have friends from different communities
Walks
that
of life,
would not
yeah.
talk to each other. But it was
Mhm.
like I was basically the heart of the party, even though it's not who I am. It was just happening organically. It's not like I was trying to find the people.
Yeah, yeah.
And with sport, for example,
Mhm.
it's a team game, of course, in this case,
Mhm.
soccer. Um,
Mhm.
I know that I still had the introverted part in me where I would be only focusing in the drill. I wasn't actually talking too much. When I was at the training session, it was dead serious. Like it was like, okay,
Right.
enough with nonsense. We don't play here. Like now it's
Yeah,
serious.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Which was basically my introversion speaking. It's ultimately like, well, I am in this social activity, but ultimately I am kind of in my own little bubble, even
Yeah, I'm not
though I
like these
am,
people. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
So there is
'Cause
that, but I think just to finish on this is like I think it is good to think about yourself, to reflect on different experiences in life, and
Mhm.
to try to think of okay, who I am, what I'm doing, and these kinds of tests can provide insights into who you are, and I think
Yeah.
that has. Um, an effect of being good for you, where it's like, oh, this is a relief. Now I can understand
Yeah.
why certain things happen in a certain way.
Yeah, yeah. I did notice that you said that, like, I didn't remember everything that you said, but it seems like you have a low score on agreeableness, like, you're not necessarily a very agreeable person, according to that test. Now, I don't see that. Like, I see that you try your best to, like, talk to all people and, like, look at all opinions, try to, like, get
Mm-hmm.
an idea of how everyone behaves and how everyone thinks, and I would actually say that that's the opposite of not agreeable, like, I guess so,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because
so
here, this is an artifact of the test. Like the kind of questions it asks is along the lines of basically, would you say a lie just to appease somebody?
yeah,
And
mhm,
then my answer is, well, no. Of course, it's with a caveat again, because it depends on what we are talking about, like what is at stake. But
yeah,
generally, I
mhm,
would be like, no, I won't just coddle you. It won't
yeah,
just be, I won't be babying you, as it were.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
So, in
same
that
way,
regard, but there is the other thing, of course, which a test cannot capture, which is like, I am also saying this from a position of having thought things through about a lot of things. For example, we discussed politics earlier, and I was telling you
mhm,
that at some point I was really opinionated. Then I started thinking in terms of, okay, what can you actually do?
yeah, yeah,
And once you have that kind of education, it ameliorates, it has an ameliorative effect on your personality traits, where it's like, yes, of course, I have a propensity to ultimately say what I feel like,
mhm,
but I will also try to understand what the other person is saying. Like, what is their perspective? Not whether I won't tell them, oh, I agree with you and it's fine. You're a good person. Not that, but
mhm,
to be like, okay, why is this person thinking this? Like, what are their priorities? What
yeah,
are they
yeah,
sensitive about?
mhm, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Would you say that, like, compared to the average person that you interact with, would you say that, like, you tend to have opinions that are more like them or more controversial compared to them?
I would say they are more controversial for many things, in the sense that I will not say something that everybody is saying because that will allow me to fit in. So
Oh,
generally,
yeah.
I'm not the
Mhm.
kind of person that will fit in just for the sake of fitting in or be friendly for the sake of friendliness. But I
Yeah,
will
neither
not be antagonistic either, like the other extreme, where it's like, you know what,
right.
I. So I think the best way to think of this, to frame this, is that I am okay to be alone. I am okay to be independent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really that.
So again, like tying into like you're okay to be independent, okay to be alone. I actually talked about this with Eric for a little bit. He told me that like you about your situation where you decided that you weren't interested in like being part of like the bigger society kind of like in a sense. So you decided to like go off and kind of do your own thing, like make your build your own house, like kind of like live very self-sufficiently, not rely on anyone or not rely on institutions rather. So what was your process um internal process maybe that led you there kind of like what made you start thinking that you want to maybe isolate a little bit from that institutional side of society and like do your own thing.
hmm it started out as a response to the burnout I was feeling from that frenetic pace of political developments. I was like, I'm
Okay.
not in control. Like, I feel that the world is moving away from me and I cannot keep up with anything.
Okay.
And I felt that I was being overworked,
Mhm.
and there was no way for me to change that. Not because people were overworking me, because everybody is overworking themselves in that environment, in that milieu. So I was like, this is not sustainable. I need a pace of living that is viable for me. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
my original idea was, okay, let me go to the countryside. It wasn't like, okay, let me go there and do my own world, as it were. It wasn't like that. It was very simple. Let me go to the countryside and I will do manual labor. I will work the fields. I will do construction work, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I will just live with a modest income. And basically, that's my life.
Mhm.
What happened though is that the market changed. So I used to rent a place really cheap. Like in the mountains, it was very quiet. There was nobody here. And the place I would rent, it wasn't a good place, but it was very cheap. It used to be like, how do you call it? Like a storage room for animals in the past. Like they would have a stable.
Mhm.
So it was like that, and it was very cheap for me. So I was renting the place, and eventually, what happened is that the market changed. So all the rent went up, like many times up,
Oh,
and
even for your place.
even for my place, like nowadays, it's basically exorbitant rates. They are not viable. And anyway, I couldn't actually live. Like my income was the minimum wage, but you cannot
Yeah.
actually live with the minimum wage. So
Yeah.
what do I do? And eventually, there wasn't a better alternative than what I did here. I was trying to find a job and basically reintegrate,
Yeah.
but that didn't work for a variety of reasons. So eventually, I
Mhm.
was like, you know what? This is what it is. And the faith I said earlier, a leap of faith. I will just do it and see what happens.
That's actually yeah, that's very interesting. So what does your day look like now? Like what would you say your day looks like just uh, yeah.
So when I have work on the computer, I will be on the computer. For
Mhm.
example, I will have a meeting, or I will be responding to emails, or I will be maintaining my packages for Emacs. So I will be doing that. If I don't have
Mhm.
any work on the computer, I will leave immediately. So I never do this kind of, okay, let me just look around and spend some time, like chill, as we were
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
earlier. So I'm like, okay, finished, out. So I switch off the computer and I am out to do manual labor. And there are all sorts of things here that I'm doing, improving the conditions of my land. There still is construction work for the house. I call it the
yeah.
hut because it started out as an actual hut idea. Eventually, it's
Mhm.
not a hut,
Yeah.
but it's an endearing term. So the house here, I still need to improve it. There are many basic things that need to happen,
Mhm.
such as insulation, such as warm water. There are all sorts of things, which will happen, other things being equal, within the next 2, 3 years. So there is that.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
also infrastructure work that I do around here. So, for example, to prevent soil erosion
Mhm.
and to improve like a garden space and the place where I can sit, and to have trees and all that.
Okay. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do find your like lifestyle very fascinating because I've never spoken to anyone else quite like that before, and I'm guessing that many people you've interviewed must have said similar things kind of on that front. Um So, would you say that, like, you prefer, manual labor, like, as a job, or would you say you prefer to, like, spend your day doing more mental labor, I guess, how you would like, what would you say is your preference as far as, like, just your day to day?
Yeah, I like the balance. I like
Okay.
to diversify because it's another way of staying fresh. Like if you do
Mhm.
too much manual labor, of course you get injured. If you do too much mental related work, you get tired eventually. Like
Yeah, you
you
get burnt
want a
out.
break.
Mhm.
So there is a burnout. And also, if you do too much work on the computer, there is the other thing, which is that you are sucked into that world where the pace is no longer consistent with your actuality.
Yeah,
So
you're just stuck in a
the time
screen. Yeah.
space of politics that we were mentioning earlier. So you are
Yeah, yeah.
eventually sucked into that. And
That yeah.
for me, it's like, no, I have to stay away. And basically, it's a way for me to have um, compartments to my lifestyle where it's like, okay, now I am in computer mode, now I am in non computer mode.
Yeah.
And basically, it's like that.
That yeah, that's actually very interesting. And it is really cool. I do find the process like very cool. So as far as like you mentioned being an introvert, but as far as like getting your social needs met, like as far as comes to like, having friends you see, maybe family, I'm not sure how your situation is, but like just as far as like just having that human interaction component from day to day, how would you say you get that, or how often would you say that you get to like maybe interact with people in person, or versus online?
Online is mostly how I interact with people, such as
Okay.
with videos like this. So it's
Okay.
mostly online because of also the work I do. But
Mhm.
uh, I would like to improve the face-to-face thing. I would like to have more time for that. I would like to be better at that.
Mhm.
But it's also a matter of I have to find time for it. It's kind of difficult
Yeah,
because
yeah,
where I am here, I have to maintain the project going. I have to, because there is also a timeliness to everything. Like, I
yeah,
have
yeah.
to fix the infrastructure. It cannot just stay there. I have to
Mhm.
improve the insulation, for example. So there are all these priorities. So they are taking away from that. To my chagrin, I must say, it's not like I like it or I'm proud of it, but it is
Yeah,
what it is.
yeah. No,
There is
it's just
this
a compromise.
expression, just to say, there is this expression, the lone wolf. And people will say that to sound cool.
Mhm.
And me, I experience it. And I tell
Yeah,
you, it's not a good experience. It's not a good experience because lone wolf, of course, means you are a wolf, and that sounds like a badass, right? But
yeah,
you are also alone. So
yeah.
there is that. And that is something that requires a certain level of fortitude to withstand. It's not easy.
Mhm.
So I don't encourage people to take words lightly.
No, that totally makes sense. At what age did you start this lifestyle as opposed to like just living in like the city or
About 10 years ago. So I was 26, I think.
oh, okay.
Thereabouts, yeah. Or 27,
Yeah,
maybe. I'm
'cause
not sure, yes. I can't
I'm
check.
I'm 25 right now, so it's like
Uh-huh.
you were not that much older than me when you first started,
Uh-huh.
and
Mhm,
that
mhm,
seems that is definitely a very remarkable and interesting kind of like way of living. Definitely not something I've ever seen before, and I do find that very, very
mhm.
fascinating. So, um, yeah, I would love to like know more. I'm almost done here with
Yeah,
your
yeah.
sketch, so uh, I'm guessing that you would also need to get going soon.
Yes,
Maybe if
yes,
there's
yes.
like a
Let's finish
final
the sketch. And
yeah, if there's like a final question or a couple of questions you have for me while I get
mhm.
this done, then now would be
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So you said about the music.
Yeah.
And the emotional impact of it. So please elaborate. Tell me what music it is. Is it listening? Is it playing? And what is the experience like?
So I have very recently started to learn how to play instruments because I didn't play instruments. I grew up singing. I've always been singing, but playing instruments is definitely new to me. And so I'm learning kind of like as a beginner, both piano and guitar. And I'm learning from friends. I'm not taking formal like lessons yet, but I have some friends who are very good at playing piano and guitar, and I'm learning how to play from them. And I've been singing, so I'm starting to like perform more these days. I'm starting a band. I've started a band, so I'm the singer in the band, and I've been like doing some shows, like just as a hobby, like in my free time, as far as like work and everything else allows it. I've been doing that. Um, but I will say that like more than like as far as like what the mental impact of singing in front of people especially has had on my brain, outside of just the just learning the technique or like the music knowledge that it's given me, has been um how to connect with an audience emotionally and how to maybe get out of your head a little bit and start seeing the singing as a way to touch people emotionally rather than just go up there and do the thing technically accurately and like get it to sound correct. um because there is definitely a level of you need to like put yourself into it to a degree that just like learning to sing correctly, sing at the right notes, the right beats, it's not gonna like do that for you. And I'm definitely like learning a lot more about how to like think that way, how to channel my own kind of like emotions that way through the process of singing in front of people. Um and so recently, I would say I very recently, just last week, I had a music lesson. Like I took a lesson with a very famous, or not necessarily super famous, but like in the music community in that city, he's pretty well known as a music teacher. And he doesn't teach he is a pianist by trade, but he doesn't teach just piano. He teaches music. He teaches how to like reach an audience. He teaches how to like connect with the song. He teaches how to like make yourself heard in a way that like the average person would not be able to do. Um so one thing that he told me is that I try to calculate everything in my performance. Like I try to get it down to like an
Mm-hmm.
exact almost formula of like here's what I have to sing. Here's when I have to sing it. Here's like how it's going to like here's how I can like phrase my mouth or however to make it sound a certain way. And he kind of like told me, and it was like one very long lesson. It was like one lesson that lasted like 3 hours. But he kind of like opened my mind to this idea that there's more to music than doing it technically correctly. And also this idea that you need to trust your own intuition a little bit more than you might be. So sometimes, even if you don't have a formula for something, even if you don't know this is how you're supposed to do it, or this is when you're supposed to do it, or however, if you just like rely on your gut feeling, you can still get it right. And that's what music or musicians are mostly doing across the board. It's just that like I come at it from a technical background, like I'm an engineer, I approach things like an engineer would, and that might not always be the right way to approach everything. I guess that's definitely something that I learned in that lesson with him, and also like in general what I've been learning in my experience with music as a whole. So
Mm-hmm.
as far as like a general mindset shift goes with music, that is what I'm trying to like work on. I'm trying to work on listening to my gut feeling or maybe trusting my intuition a little bit more as opposed to trying to calculate everything. Um
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. And that's
Have
why I
you
was
tried
like fascinated.
improvisation?
So
Maybe it's too early,
improvisation,
but yeah.
yeah, improvisation with singing is something that I'm a little bit still maybe a little shy to do because you kind of have to be very confident with like the fact that you'll do it correct, not correctly necessarily, but like you'll do it in a way that fits the song. Like, if you like you can go to an improvisational kind of break. And with instruments, I think that it's a little bit more easy to access teaching for that. Like people will teach you how to improvise on piano or improvise on guitar. Improvising with singing, although people do it, I think that most people who teach singing or even sing, it's not considered a requirement that you have to be able to do it.
Mm.
So I am trying to learn, but I will say that it's something that I'm not good at yet, and it's something I haven't done in front of people yet. But it is definitely something that I want to get into because again it ties back into the same thing, like trusting your gut and listening to what your brain is telling you, like this is what seems correct, do it. And this is what seems like it'll sound nice, this is what seems like you can really groove to, or you could really like emote to, and you have to just do it, and you don't have time to calculate or come up with a formula. So
Mm.
I do think that improvisation is going to be very helpful to me musically. Um, so yeah, that's my answer on
Yeah, yeah,
improvisation.
yeah. That's good. That's good
Yeah,
because it helps with this idea of getting out of your head.
yeah,
Like
mhm,
you don't have a formula for everything. Of course, you can have a general idea what the structure is and the steps
mhm,
involved, but you allow space for the unknown.
exactly, yeah. Would you say like if I were to like try to do what you're doing with your blog and like writing or like try to like write on the internet, um, I've actually attempted that more than once or twice. Like I've attempted to like write something and put it on the internet. And what ends up happening is I'm just never satisfied with what I write. I can't
Hmm.
keep mistakes in there. I can't allow it to look less than perfect.
Hmm.
And I stress about it so much that because, oh, there's this little thing in there that it probably doesn't sound right, it sounds stupid or something
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And and eventually it gets to a point where I just take the post down.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
how would you say that I could maybe like learn from the way that you just like
Hmm.
started doing it and learn to like come out of that need for
Hmm.
perfection all the time?
We already touched on the other side of this, which is when people are attached to their opinions and their opinions are their identity. So
Mhm.
it's basically the same thing where it's like, oh, there are mistakes there. So the article is flawed. By extension, I am flawed. And of
Mhm.
course, you don't want to tolerate that. You want to be
Yeah.
perfect. You want to be
Mhm.
better or whatever. What helps is to say that what I am now writing is a snapshot of me in a certain situation. It's not me as such. So I
Right.
am in the process of becoming. I am in the process of learning new things, of improving. So I am not fixed like this. And if there are mistakes, everybody makes mistakes all the time for everything.
Mhm.
And acknowledging them ultimately makes you also more resilient emotionally and more resilient to what people call criticism, where it's like, well, you took down an idea. Thank you for doing that because now I understand that it was wrong and I don't have to live with that falsehood anymore.
Yeah. Mhm.
Or with that
Okay.
falsehood, as in the false impression of me as me being perfect when in reality I'm not, for
Yeah.
example. Or also a
It's actually
substantive
part
part.
of
Yeah.
yeah, the idea that you are not perfect on something that you thought you were perfect on is as much of like it's an important part of self improvement also. Yeah, that actually makes sense. Because like I've noticed that one thing you do in your articles is like let's say you have like a little typo in there somewhere. You don't take it out. You leave it there
Hmm.
because you want I think that that's perfect like framing for the snapshot idea, the fact that you're like this is who I was in that situation and in that situation I made a typo, but
Hmm.
I'm not going to take it out because um that's like it wouldn't be a true reflection of who I was in that moment if I did, kind
Hmm.
of, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yes, yes,
Um,
exactly. Plus,
yeah,
um, why are we so sensitive about the typo? Like, if I make a mistake, what will happen? Does the world depend on that statement being grammatically correct or not? So I think also not taking ourselves too seriously. Like, I just
mhm,
wrote a blog post, so what? Instead of
yeah,
thinking like, oh, I wrote a blog post. Oh my goodness, there are mistakes there. It's the end of the world. It's not.
yeah, yeah, mhm. Another thing that tends to happen when I start writing blog posts is, like, I start to find it pointless unless people are gonna read it. Like, I
Hmm.
start to be like, now that I have a blog, I need to, like, focus on promoting it,
Hmm.
which I guess, like, you don't do that from what you don't
No.
even have social media, you don't try to
No.
promote it, you just write and you let whoever reads it, read it, kind of.
Yeah.
You are good at not gamifying the process, you're good at not making it into something that needs to have a goal, like you said earlier. What would you say is, like, the way you think to put yourself in that mindset as opposed to, "This needs to have a productive output," or
Hmm. Hmm. So, if you write for an audience, um, do you know the audience? The answer is no. Or, of course, you
Yeah,
do market research, and then, of course, you are doing marketing. You're not longer doing blogging. But if you're
yeah,
writing for an imaginary audience, you actually
mhm,
don't know them.
yeah,
So, what you are actually writing for is a projection of the people you would like to be addressing, or the people who have the kind of critical eye that you have about yourself. So
Hmm.
ultimately, it's a little bit like your fears talking, or
Yeah.
your aspirations, your hopes, but you don't know any of that. It's not factual. You cannot actually say that I know my audience.
Yeah.
And more generally, I don't know who will read what, in the same way that I don't control who will watch this and what they will make of it. Like, I
Yeah.
cannot operate with the assumption that I have to please this imaginary person, because it's impossible to flesh out this person.
Yeah. You just don't even know who you're trying to please.
Exactly. So ultimately, what happens is, if you are doing that, you don't have a fixed point. You will be chasing trends until something sticks. But that something that sticks, there is an expression in Greek, which is, the translation of it is wind gatherings, wind scatterings. So if you
Hmm.
do something that you have gamified and now it attracts a lot of people, that's a little bit like the leaves that the wind gathers around. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
there are so many leaves here, right? It's amazing. But
Hmm.
then, of course, what comes easy goes easy. So wind scatterings. Again, the leaves will scatter at the wind.
Yeah.
So if you are invested in that, then ultimately you will be feeling bad about yourself.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because there will be a point where you are not popular anymore. Like, you are not the hottest topic now. Like, we have moved
Yeah.
on. And this also ties into what we were saying earlier. Like, the pace of the news cycle is such where, okay, one day we are talking about this, the next day it's irrelevant. So we talk about something else. So if you have a certain niche there, ultimately, you won't always be having your moment of glory. So
Yeah.
you have to
Hmm.
ground yourself in that which always gives you comfort, which always you enjoy doing. And what would that be? Ultimately, talking or writing about what ultimately you care about.
Yeah. That's fair. So, yeah, I mean, I'm actually like definitely feeling inspired after this conversation to like start writing something on my own
Hmm.
because again, like maybe you didn't feel like you were talking about what you've written, but I do think that indirectly you are
Hmm.
talking about like you were talking the same kind of like philosophy that you apply to talking or the way you apply to like approaching a certain topic. It seems to me that it's the same philosophy that you're applying to writing, and I'm definitely like inspired to like try that for myself because writing for people is not something I've ever done. It's not something I've ever been comfortable doing. I've tried, but I've never like kept posts up for more than a couple days
Hmm.
because I've always been so afraid that it's not good enough and I'll end up taking it down and I'll end up going back in and editing the same stuff a million times because I'm like, oh, I just came up with an idea that fits, like that explains what I was trying to say better.
Hmm.
And then I'll
Hmm.
just go in and I'll edit it. Even though like that wasn't the point in the first place. The point is just like you said, to create a snapshot of yourself, a personality snapshot almost, and put it out there on
Hmm.
a any topic that is relevant to you in that moment. And I think that that's definitely a new approach to writing. At least the word snapshot is kind of key for me, I think, there. Um, because it's not a way that I've ever thought about it before,
Hmm.
at least on my own. Yeah.
And it's an
So,
accountability structure. It keeps you honest.
oh,
Be-
yeah. It also,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It keeps you doing something that, writing something that's like only authentic to your true self, not something that's
Hmm.
that you're doing to get views or to get
Hmm.
like gamify and get like results out of it.
Yeah,
Mm.
but also in the sense of, if you write something informative, and we can
Mm.
close with this, by the way, if you finish that, right? If you write something informative, which is like, I want to communicate something, I want to teach people something, but
Mhm.
then, of course, this reflects my current level of knowledge, my current level of communication skills.
Yeah, mhm,
So there is that.
exactly. Yep, so I did kind of finish it. I think I
Hmm.
might make some slight edits to this,
Yeah, 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 of course, of course.
and but
Wow, amazing.
it's
Thank you. That's
yeah,
very cool.
it needs a
Uh,
little bit of
no, no, it's very, I like.
Thanks.
If you can, of course, you will have to put your signature.
Oh, yeah,
But
sure.
if you can send me a picture, and then I can post it on my website as well.
That would be yeah, I'd definitely do
Yeah.
that for you. Let me just,
Hmm.
like, get in my final edits to this because
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like
yeah, whatever you feel
like,
like.
I think that maybe it's a little bit wonky when it's flipped. I can already see that in the camera. It's looking a little
To
bit
me, it
odd when
looks great. No problem.
Well, thank you so much, and,
You're
uh
welcome, Ro.
yeah, of course, and, yeah, I would love to, like, do a part 2 if you do that maybe
Hmm.
at some point.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
like, keep me in the loop and,
Hmm.
let me know. We definitely touched on a lot of very interesting topics today, and
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
like
yeah.
further on a lot of them.
Hmm.
So,
hmm. Yeah,
again,
in
it
a
was
few
great
months, I
talking to
would
you.
say. Yeah, why not? That sounds great.
Of course, yeah, it was great talking to you. I will send
Hmm.
you a picture of this, and
Hmm.
you can I would love it if you'd put it on your website. That would
Yeah.
be great. And once again, thank you so much for having me on here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That's great. So I will stop the recording and then we can call it a day. So let me stop now.